Charles Richardson adjusts his experimental exosuit as he enters the grand hall of the Yadrin diplomatic reception. The sleek, form-fitting armor gleams under the alien lights, its advanced pheromone synthesizers and translators humming softly. He takes a deep breath, acutely aware that the successive years of delicate negotiations between Earth and Yadra rests on his shoulders. The cavernous room buzzes with activity. Yadran diplomats, their iridescent scales shimmering, mingle with representatives from various galactic species. Charles spots a group of Yadran females across the room, their elongated necks adorned with intricate jewelry. Among them stands Gaia, her striking beauty unmistakable even by human standards. As Charles approaches, he catches snippets of their conversation through his suit's translator. His presence draws their attention, and suddenly, the group erupts into laughter. Their translator-enhanced voices cut through the ambient noise. "Look at this human," one says, her voice dripping with disdain. "So small and soft. How did they ever manage interstellar travel?" Gaia, her emerald eyes fixed on Charles, adds, "Perhaps they're kept as pets by more advanced species." The laughter intensifies. Charles feels his face flush, his confidence evaporating. He fumbles with the suit's controls, desperate to activate its diplomatic protocols. Instead, his fingers brush against an unmarked button. Suddenly, the suit hums to life. A faint mist emanates from its surface, filling the air with an invisible cloud of synthesized Yadrin pheromones. The laughter abruptly stops. The Yadrin females freeze, their eyes widening. Gaia takes a step forward, her earlier mockery replaced by intense curiosity. "Human," she says, her voice husky. "You smell." "Intriguing." Charles blinks in confusion as the group of females begins to close in around him. He notices Yadrin males nearby bristling, their postures becoming aggressive. The atmosphere in the hall shifts palpably, tension crackling through the air. A Yadrin male, his scales flushed with anger, shouts. The human is using biological warfare. Guards! Chaos erupts. Diplomats scatter. Security forces converge, and accusations fly. Charles finds himself at the center of a storm, Gaia reaching for him as her peers pull her back. High-ranking officials from both species rush to intervene, their voices raised in alarm. "Ambassador Richardson, come with us immediately," a stern-faced human security officer orders, grabbing Charles's arm. As they hurry him towards a secure room, Charles catches glimpses of the unfolding disaster. Yadrin security forces mobilize, their weapons drawn. Human diplomats gesticulate wildly, trying to explain the situation. Outside, through the hall's massive windows, he sees crowds gathering, their faces twisted in anger. The door to the secure room slams shut behind Charles. He collapses into a chair, his mind reeling. The suit continues to hum, its pheromone synthesizers working overtime. He claws at the controls, desperate to shut it off. A screen on the wall flickers to life, showing news feeds from both Earth and Yadra. Headlines scream about biological attacks and imminent war. Protests erupt in major cities across both worlds. Military vessels move into defensive positions in space. Charles's communicator buzzes. The message chills him to the bone. "Ambassador Richardson, you are to appear before a joint human-Yadrin tribunal immediately. The fate of both our species may depend on your testimony." As the gravity of the situation sinks in, Charles realizes that his simple mistake may have just triggered an interstellar conflict. The experimental suit, designed to bridge gaps between species, has instead deepened them catastrophically. As he prepares to face the tribunal, Charles can only hope that diplomacy will prevail over the chaos he has unwittingly unleashed. As the secure room door closes behind him, Charles Richardson's mind races, grappling with the enormity of what has just transpired. The humming of the malfunctioning exosuit fills the silence, a constant reminder of the chaos he's unwittingly unleashed. Hours blur together as Charles endures a flurry of interrogations and examinations. Eventually, exhausted and disoriented, he finds himself being escorted through dimly lit corridors. The Yatteran sun is just peeking over the horizon as Charles is led into a stark holding cell. "Ambassador Richardson, you will remain here until the tribunal convenes," a stone-faced human security officer informs him. "For your own safety and per Yatteran insistence, we're removing the exosuit." Charles nods numbly as technicians carefully extract him from the suit. He watches as they seal it in a containment unit, whisking it away for further analysis. Left alone in simple civilian clothes, Charles feels exposed and vulnerable. As the first full day of his confinement dawns, Charles paces his cell, replaying the disastrous reception in his mind. The laughter of the Yatteran females, Gaia's mocking words, the sudden shift in her demeanor. It all swirls in a maddening loop. A commotion outside his cell draws Charles's attention. Through the small window in the door, he glimpses a familiar face. Dr. Eliza Hartman, lead xenobiologist and creator of the ill-fated exosuit. Her appearance sends a jolt of hope through him. "Dr. Hartman," Charles calls out, pressing against the door. "What's happening out there?" The scientist's eyes meet his, a mix of concern and commitment in her gaze. "I'm here to help, Charles. We'll get to the bottom of this." Before Charles can respond, she's whisked away by security personnel. Left alone once more, he slumps onto his cot, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. Meanwhile, in another wing of the diplomatic complex, Gaia rides on a medical bed, her iridescent scales dulled and her emerald eyes wild. "I need to see him," she shrieks, straining against her restraints. "The human, Charles. Where is he?" Yatteran and human medical staff hover around her, exchanging worried glances. A human doctor leans in, scanning Gaia with a handheld device. "Her neurochemical readings are off the charts," he mutters to his Yatteran colleague. "Whatever was in those synthesized pheromones, it's triggered a severe dependency response." Across the complex, in a high-security command center, Admiral Zorn's scales flush dark with rage as he addresses a group of Yatteran military officials. This human treachery cannot stand. He bellows, bringing his fist down on a holographic display of the solar system. "We must strike now, before they can launch another attack." One of his subordinates steps forward, mandibles clicking nervously. "Admiral, perhaps we should wait for the tribunal's findings before dash." "Silence!" Zorn snaps. "Mobilize the fleet. We'll show these soft-skinned interlopers the true might of Yattera." As Zorn's orders ripple through the Yatteran military apparatus, their human counterparts scramble to respond. Earth's defensive grid hums to life. Colonial outposts buttress their shields, and warships move into defensive formations. Back on Earth, the situation deteriorates rapidly. The streets of Geneva erupt in chaos as protesters clash with riot police outside the Interstellar Relations headquarters. Signs bearing slogans like "No More Secrets" and "Hands Off Yattera" bob above the seething crowd. Inside the building, harried officials struggle to contain the fallout. Emergency meetings convene and dissolve in a blur of raised voices and frantic gesticulations. The news feeds blare a constant stream of updates, each more alarming than the last. As the hour of the tribunal approaches, Dr. Hartman hunches over a workstation in a makeshift lab, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. The quarantined exosuit lies before her, its panels splayed open like a mechanical autopsy. "This doesn't make sense," she mutters, comparing readouts on multiple screens. The pheromone synthesizers were functioning normally right up until... Wait! Her fingers fly across the keyboard, bringing up a microscopic view of the suit's inner workings. "Oh my God!" she breathes, leaning in close. These components, they've been altered. But how? When? Before she can dig deeper, an alarm blares through the complex. Dr. Hartman's head snaps up, her discovery momentarily forgotten, as she rushes to the nearest window. In the sky above, a strange formation of ships unlike any she's ever seen descends through the atmosphere. In his cell, Charles jolts awake at the sound of the alarm. He stumbles to his feet, just as the door swings open. Two grim-faced security officers enter. "It's time, Ambassador," one of them says. "The tribunal is convening now." As they escort him through the corridors, Charles notices the palpable tension in the air. Staff members rush past, their faces etched with worry. Through windows, he catches glimpses of the alien ships hovering ominously in the sky. They arrive at the tribunal chamber, a vast room dominated by a crescent-shaped table where human and Yadrin officials sit in uneasy proximity. Charles's eyes sweep the room, taking in the tense faces and rigid postures. Then his gaze locks onto a familiar figure, Gaia, seated in a cordoned-off area, flanked by medical staff. Their eyes meet, and in that moment, the chaos around them seems to recede. There's a recognition, a connection that transcends the tumultuous events that brought them here. Gaia's scales shimmer, her emerald eyes fill with a mixture of longing and confusion. As Charles is led to the witness stand, the weight of the moment crashes over him. The fate of two species hangs in the balance, with the added complication of an unknown force literally looming overhead. He takes a deep breath, steeling himself for what's to come. The lead adjudicator, a stern-faced Yadrin elder, leans forward. "Ambassador Charles Richardson," he intones, his voice carrying through the tense silence of the chamber. "You stand before this tribunal accused of initiating a biological attack against the Yadrin people. How do you plead?" Charles opens his mouth to respond, acutely aware that his next words could shape the future of human-Yadrin relations, and perhaps the fate of both their species in the face of this new, unknown threat. Charles takes a deep breath, his mind racing. Before he can respond, the chamber doors burst open, and Dr. Eliza Hartman rushes in, her lab coat billowing behind her. "Wait," she calls out, her voice echoing through the suddenly silent room. "I have crucial information regarding the exosuit malfunction." The lead adjudicator raises a hand, signaling for silence. "Dr. Hartman, this is highly irregular. However, given the gravity of the situation, we will hear your findings." Eliza nods, her face flushed with urgency. She approaches the tribunal panel, tablet in hand. "Upon thorough examination of the exosuit, I've discovered evidence of external tampering. The pheromone synthesizers were altered by an unknown party." Murmurs ripple through the chamber as Eliza projects holographic schematics of the suit's inner workings. She points to specific areas, highlighting the modifications. These components were not part of the original design. They were inserted with surgical precision, likely just before the diplomatic reception. The revelation sends shockwaves through the tribunal. Human and Yadrin officials lean in, examining the evidence with intense scrutiny. Charles feels a glimmer of hope as he watches their reactions, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Suddenly, alarms blare throughout the complex. A harried aide rushes into the chamber, whispering urgently to Admiral Zorn. The Yadrin military leader's scales flush dark with concern as he rises to address the tribunal. "Esteemed colleagues," Zorn's voice booms, silencing the room. "We receive reports of an unknown fleet approaching our system. Given this new threat, I propose we temporarily set aside our differences and form an alliance to investigate and defend against these intruders." Before anyone can respond, chaos erupts as Gaia bursts into the chamber. Her scales shimmer erratically, her movements frantic. Security personnel move to intercept her, but Charles, acting on instinct, leaps from his seat and places himself between Gaia and the approaching guards. "Wait!" Charles shouts, his arms spread wide. "Don't hurt her." The room freezes, all eyes fixed on the tableau before them. A human diplomat, shielding a Yadaran female from her own people. In that moment, the absurdity of their recent hostilities becomes glaringly apparent. Ambassador Elena Sato, a seasoned human diplomat, seizes the opportunity. She stands, her voice cutting through the tension. Honored members of the tribunal, I believe we're witnessing a solution to our current dilemma. All attention turns to Sato as she continues. I propose we form a joint human Yadaran team, led by Ambassador Richardson and Gaia, to investigate this unknown fleet. Their unique connection, however unintentional, could be the key to fostering genuine cooperation between our species. Admiral Zorn's mandibles click as he considers the proposal. After a tense moment, he nods. Agreed. This mission will serve dual purposes, addressing the new threat and providing a practical test of human Yadaran collaboration. As the tribunal erupts into discussions, Charles turns to Gaia. Her emerald eyes meet his, filled with a mixture of confusion and longing. Despite the language barrier, he senses a connection forming between them, transcending the effects of the synthesized pheromones. Dr. Hartman approaches, her expression a mix of concern and fascination. I'll join the team, she announces. We need to continue studying the pheromone effects and develop a treatment for Gaia's symptoms. Over the next few hours, as news of the approaching fleet spreads, the complex becomes a hive of activity. Human and Yadaran military personnel, so recently at odds, now work side by side to coordinate their efforts. Charles, Gaia, and Dr. Hartman are whisked away to a secure facility for mission briefing and preparation. As they enter a state-of-the-art laboratory, Charles marvels at the seamless integration of human and Yadaran technology. Dr. Hartman immediately sets to work, her fingers flying over holographic displays as she analyzes Gaia's neurochemical readings. Fascinating, she murmurs. The pheromone effects are unlike anything we've seen before. It's as if they've awakened a latent compatibility between your species. Charles and Gaia exchange glances, both acutely aware of the growing connection between them. As Dr. Hartman continues her work, they begin the arduous process of learning to communicate without translators. Their interactions, closely monitored by officials from both species, provide valuable insights into cross-species communication. Charles finds himself drawn to the graceful movements of Gaia's elongated neck, while she seems fascinated by the expressiveness of his human face. As the hours pass, reports flood in from across Earth and Yadara. The initial protests have given way to a shared sense of unease about the approaching fleet. Military vessels from both worlds move into defensive formations, their combined might a testament to the rapidly forming alliance. Finally, the moment arrives. Charles, Gaia, Dr. Hartman, and a carefully selected crew of humans and Yadaran stand before their reconnaissance vessel. The ship, a sleek hybrid of technologies from both worlds, represents the first tangible product of their fledgling partnership. As they board the vessel, Charles feels the weight of two civilizations on his shoulders. He glances at Gaia, seeing his own mix of apprehension and perseverance reflected in her emerald eyes. Whatever lies ahead, they will face it together. The ship's engines hum to life, a perfect harmony of human and Yadaran engineering. As they prepare for launch, Charles takes his place on the bridge, Gaia by his side. He gazes out at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there an unknown force awaits them, a force that may have orchestrated this entire chain of events. With a final nod from Admiral Zorn and the human military liaison, the ship lifts off. As they accelerate towards the upper atmosphere, leaving behind a world forever changed by recent events, Charles can't help but wonder, what will they find in the depths of space, and how will it reshape the future of both their species? Species. The ship's engines roared to life, propelling them into the vast unknown. As they left Earth's atmosphere behind, Charles felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He glanced at Gaia, her scales shimmering in the soft glow of the ship's interior lighting. Their eyes met, and he felt a spark of connection that transcended their biological differences. Dr. Hartman's voice broke the moment. "Ambassador, Gaia, I need to run some tests on both of you. We need to monitor the ongoing effects of the pheromones." They followed her to the ship's medical bay, a sleek fusion of human and Yadrin technology. As Dr. Hartman attached sensors to their bodies, Charles noticed the curious glances from the rest of the crew. Their unique bond had become a focal point of fascination and concern. Days passed as they journeyed deeper into space. The ship's advanced sensors swept the surrounding area, searching for any sign of the unknown fleet. Tension aboard the vessel was palpable, with human and Yadrin crew members still adjusting to their newfound alliance. Captain Jax Thorne, a seasoned human officer with a reputation for level-headedness, stood at the helm. His Yadrin second-in-command, Lieutenant Zara, hovered nearby, her elongated neck swiveling as she monitored multiple displays. Suddenly, a sharp beat cut through the ambient hum of the ship. Lieutenant Zara's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Captain, we're detecting a faint distress signal. It's coming from a nearby asteroid field." Captain Thorne frowned, studying the holographic display. "Can we identify the source?" "Negative," Zara replied. "The signal is weak and the asteroid field is interfering with our sensors." Thorne's face hardened in drive. "We should investigate. It could be related to our mission." Zara's scales flushed dark with concern. "Captain, with all due respect, this could be a trap. We should stay focused on our primary objective." The captain considered her words for a moment before shaking his head. "We can't ignore a potential cry for help. Set a course for the asteroid field, but approach with caution." As the ship carefully navigated through the dense field of space debris, Charles and Gaia joined the bridge crew. They watched in awe as massive chunks of rock drifted past the view screen, some larger than their ship. "There," Thorne pointed. "I see something reflecting light. Magnify that sector." The image zoomed in, revealing a battered vessel of unfamiliar design. Its hull was scarred and pitted, evidence of a recent battle. "Prepare a boarding party," Thorne ordered. "Ambassador Richardson, Gaia, Dr. Hartman, I want you three on the team. Your unique perspectives could be valuable." They suited up in the airlock, donning sleek exosuits designed for both human and Yadrin physiology. As the airlock cycled, Charles felt a surge of adrenaline. He glanced at Gaia, her emerald eyes visible through her helmet visor. She gave him a small nod, and he felt oddly reassured. The team crossed the short distance between ships, their magnetic boots securing them to the alien vessel's hull. They found an intact airlock and carefully entered. Inside, the corridors were dim, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows. Signs of a recent struggle were evident. Scorch marks on the walls, debris scattered across the floor. "This technology," Dr. Hartman murmured, running a scanner over a nearby console. "It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Far more advanced than either human or Yadrin tech." Captain Thorne's voice crackled over their comms. "Split up to cover more ground. Richardson, you and Gaia check out the living quarters. Hartman, focus on their medical bay if you can find it. The rest of you, with me to the bridge." Charles and Gaia made their way through the winding corridors, their footsteps echoing in the empty ship. They passed what appeared to be communal areas, now eerily silent. "Charles," Gaia's voice was soft in his ear, "I sense something, a presence." He turned to her, curious. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, they rounded a corner and froze. Before them was a hidden chamber, its entrance partially concealed by debris. Inside, a soft blue glow emanated from what appeared to be a stasis pod. They approached cautiously. Through the frosted surface of the pod, they could make out a figure, clearly alive but badly injured. The being inside matched neither human nor Yadrin physiology. "We need to get Dr. Hartman here," Charles said, reaching for his comm unit. Suddenly, the alien's eyes snapped open. It raised a trembling hand, gesturing weakly towards a nearby console. Charles hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. As his hand touched the smooth surface of the console, a holographic message sprang to life, filling the room with shimmering light. The image that appeared was that of a being similar to the one in the stasis pod, but healthy and strong. Its voice, though alien, was somehow understandable to both Charles and Gaia. "If you are witnessing this message, then our worst fears have come to pass," the being spoke. "We are the progenitors, an ancient race tasked with guiding the development of younger civilizations." Charles and Gaia exchanged shocked glances as the message continued. "The fleet you seek is not a new threat, but a safeguard we put in place eons ago. It is a defensive system designed to activate when developing races reach a point of large-scale conflict. Its purpose is not to destroy, but to guide, to push younger species towards cooperation and peace." The implications of this revelation began to sink in, but before they could fully process it, alarms blared throughout the ship. The console in front of them flashed red, and the hologram flickered out of existence. Captain Thorne's voice crackled urgently over the comms. "All teams, evacuate immediately. The ship's systems are overloading. We have minutes before it self-destructs." Charles grabbed Gaia's hand instinctively. "We need to move now." They raced back the way they came, the ship groaning and shuddering around them. As they rounded a corner, a violent explosion rocked the vessel. The ceiling collapsed, cutting them off from the rest of the team. "Richardson, Gaia, report." Thorne's voice was barely audible through the static. "We're cut off from the main airlock," Charles responded, coughing as acrid smoke filled the air. "We'll find another way out." He looked at Gaia, seeing his own tenacity reflected in her eyes. "Together," she said, her hand still firmly in his. They pushed forward, navigating through the maze of collapsing corridors. The ship's structure was failing rapidly around them, each step potentially their last. As they reached a dead end, Gaia's scales began to shimmer intensely. She placed her free hand against a wall panel, and to Charles's amazement, the alien technology responded to her touch. A hidden door slid open, revealing an escape pod. They tumbled inside, the door sealing behind them just as another explosion rocked the ship. Charles's fingers flew over the unfamiliar controls, somehow knowing which buttons to press. The pod ejected with a violent jolt, sending them spinning into the asteroid field. Through the small viewport, they watched as the alien vessel erupted in a spectacular explosion. As the pod stabilized, Charles and Gaia found themselves face to face in the cramped space. Their breath came in ragged gasps, the adrenaline of their escape still coursing through them. In that moment, the tension that had been building between them reached a crescendo. Their faces drew closer, the attraction undeniable. But before their lips could meet, a beam of light cut through the darkness. The reconnaissance ship had found them. As the tractor beam pulled their pod to safety, Charles and Gaia shared a look of mingled relief and lingering desire. They had survived, but the implications of what they had discovered and the nature of their evolving relationship promised to make the journey ahead anything but simple. The pod docked with a metallic clang, and as the airlock cycled, they knew their adventure was just the beginning. The fate of two species now rested on the information they carried, and the bond they had forged in the face of danger. The fate of two species now rested on the information they carried, and the bond they had forged in the face of danger. As Charles and Gaia were pulled into the reconnaissance ship, relief washed over them. They had survived, but their ordeal was nowhere near the end. Captain Jax Thorne greeted them as they exited the airlock. "Ambassador, Gaia, glad to see you're both in one piece. We need a full debrief immediately." Before they could respond, the ship lurched violently. Warning klaxons blared throughout the vessel. "Report. Thorn barked into his comm unit. Lieutenant Zara's voice crackled through the speakers. Captain, we're experiencing a critical malfunction in the hybrid engine. We've dropped out of FTL travel. Thorn's face hardened. Where are we? Unknown. Sir, we've emerged in an uncharted star system. The captain turned to Charles and Gaia. We'll have to postpone that debrief. Head to the bridge. We need all hands on deck. As they raced through the corridors, the ship shuddered again. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting an eerie red glow. They arrived on the bridge to find control chaos. Human and Yadrin crew members worked feverishly at their stations. Dr. Hartman hunched over a console, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. Captain, I'm picking up a massive energy signature from a nearby planet. The pattern, it matches the progenitor technology we encountered on the derelict vessel. Thorn's eyes narrowed. How long until repairs are complete? Engineering estimates at least 6 hours, sir, Zara reported. The captain paced for a moment, then nodded decisively. We can't ignore this. Prepare a landing party. Richardson, Gaia, Hartman, you're with me. We'll investigate while repairs are underway. Within minutes, they were aboard a shuttle, descending towards the planet's surface. Charles felt Gaia's presence beside him, a comforting warmth in the cramped space. As they entered the atmosphere, the shuttle began to shake violently. Severe turbulence, the pilot shouted. Controls are unresponsive. Charles gripped his seat as the shuttle plummeted. Trees rushed up to meet them through the view screen. With a bone-jarring impact, they crash-landed in a dense alien forest. Smoke filled the cabin. Everyone out! Thorn ordered, coughing. They stumbled from the wreckage into a world of vibrant purples and blues. Massive tree-like structures towered above them, their leaves shimmering with an otherworldly iridescence. Dr. Hartman activated her comm unit, but only static emerged. Communications are down, she reported grimly, and our NAV systems are offline. The planet's magnetic field is interfering with our equipment. Charles surveyed their surroundings. Strange, bioluminescent creatures scuttled through the underbrush. In the distance, a haunting cry echoed through the forest. We need to find the source of that energy signature, Thorn said. It's our best chance of getting off this rock. As they ventured deeper into the alien wilderness, Charles and Gaia found themselves at the front of the group. Their shared experiences had forged an unspoken bond, allowing them to communicate with mere glances and subtle gestures. A vine-like tendril snaked towards Gaia's ankle. Charles spotted it and pulled her back just as it lashed out, barely missing her. Thanks, she breathed, her scales flushing a deep green. They pressed on, navigating through the hazardous flora and fauna. Hours passed, and fatigue began to set in. Just as despair threatened to overtake them, the forest opened up to reveal a clearing. Before them stood the crumbling remains of what could only be described as a temple. Its architecture was hauntingly familiar. The same sweeping lines and crystalline structures they had seen on the derelict progenitor ship. This is it, Dr. Hartman whispered, her eyes wide with excitement. The energy signature is emanating from within. As they approached the ruins, Charles noticed a series of intricate symbols carved into a stone slab. He reached out, tracing them with his fingers. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shuddered. With a groan of ancient machinery, a hidden door slid open, revealing a dark passageway. Captain Thorn activated his suit's illumination. Stay alert. We don't know what we're walking into. They descended into the darkness, the air growing cooler and heavy with the scent of ozone. The passage opened into a vast chamber that took their breath away. Sleek, otherworldly technology filled the space, pulsing with an inner light. At the center stood a towering obelisk, crackling with energy. Dr. Hartman approached it, her scanner whirring. This is incredible, The energy output is off the charts. I think this might be a control hub for the progenitor defense fleet. As Charles and Gaia moved to join her, their feet triggered a hidden mechanism. A high-pitched whine filled the air and massive doors slammed shut, sealing them inside. "It's a security system," Thorne shouted. "Find a way to shut it down." But before they could act, a fine mist began to seep from hidden vents. The alien gas filled the chamber, its effect immediate and profound. Charles felt his heart racing, his skin tingling. He turned to Gaia, and the world seemed to fall away. Her emerald eyes captivated him, drawing him in. He could see the same intensity reflected in her gaze. "Charles," she whispered, her voice husky. I can't." He reached for her, their fingers intertwining. The touch sent shock waves through his system. Every nerve ending felt alive, hyper-aware. Dr. Hartman's voice broke through the haze. "The gas. It's affecting our brain chemistry, particularly yours, Charles and Gaia. Your prior exposure to the synthesized pheromones has made you more susceptible." Charles struggled to focus, but Gaia's presence consumed him. Their faces drew closer, the pull between them nearly irresistible. "Ambassador, Gaia," Thorne's sharp voice cut through the fog. "We need you focused. The fate of our species depends on it." With Herculean effort, Charles pulled back. He saw the same internal struggle mirrored in Gaia's eyes. They nodded to each other, a silent pact to resist the gas's influence. Dr. Hartman worked feverishly at a nearby console. "I think I've figured it out. This obelisk isn't just a beacon. It's a control hub for the entire defense fleet. But activating it requires a unique bioauthentication." "What kind of authentication?" Thorne asked, his voice strained as he fought against the gas's effects. Hartman looked up, her eyes locking on to Charles and Gaia. "A combined human and Yadrin genetic signature." The implications hung in the air. Charles felt Gaia's hand tighten in his. Their eyes met, a world of unspoken emotions passing between them. "We have to do it," Gaia said softly. Charles nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "Together." As they approached the obelisk, the chamber hummed with building energy. The fate of two civilizations rested on their shoulders, their unique bond the key to averting disaster. Their hands, human and Yadrin, reached out towards the glowing surface of the obelisk. As their fingers made contact, a blinding light erupted from the structure, enveloping them both. In that moment, Charles felt a connection to Gaia deeper than anything he had ever experienced. The light intensified, spreading throughout the chamber. The team shielded their eyes, not knowing what would happen next, but certain that the course of history was about to change forever. The blinding light faded, leaving Charles and Gaia disoriented. They stumbled back from the obelisk, their hands still intertwined. The chamber spun around them, the alien gas clouding their thoughts. Dr. Hartman's voice cut through the haze. "The gas is affecting our brain chemistry. We need to neutralize it, fast." She rushed to her equipment, her movements unsteady but determined. Charles watched her work, fighting against the overwhelming urge to lose himself in Gaia's emerald eyes. "Stay. Focused," Captain Thorne growled, his own voice strained. Dr. Hartman's fingers flew across her portable lab interface. "I think I can create a counteragent. The unique bond between Charles and Gaia. It's given me an idea." She extracted a small sample of blood from both Charles and Gaia, her movements precise despite the gas's influence. The minutes stretched as she worked, the team struggling to maintain their composure. Finally, Dr. Hartman held up a vial of shimmering liquid. "Got it. This should neutralize the effects." She quickly administered the counteragent to each team member. Charles felt a cool sensation spread through his body, clearing the fog from his mind. He took a deep breath, his thoughts sharpening. "Everyone okay?" Thorne asked, his voice steady once more. They nodded, the alien gas's influence dissipating. Dr. Hartman turned to Charles and Gaia, her eyes bright with excitement. The obelisk requires a combined human-Yadrin genetic signature to activate fully. You two are our best chance. Charles met Gaia's gaze, seeing his own tenacity reflected there. What do we need to do? Dr. Hartman gestured to a newly revealed console near the obelisk. I've created a specialized interface. You will need to physically connect, your bodies acting as conduits for the activation process. Charles and Gaia approached the console, their hands finding each other once more. As they positioned themselves, Charles felt a surge of electricity course through him. Ready? He asked softly. Gaia nodded, her scales shimmering with anticipation. Together, they placed their free hands on the console. Instantly, energy pulsed through their bodies. Charles gasped as his mind expanded, connecting with Gaia's in a way he'd never experienced before. The obelisk thrummed with power, its surface rippling like liquid metal. Around them, the chamber came to life. Hidden doors slid open, revealing passageways deeper into the facility. Captain Thorne snapped into action. Zara, Hartman with me. We'll explore these new areas. Richardson, Gaia, stay connected. We need full access to the system. As the others disappeared down the newly revealed corridors, Charles found himself lost in the connection with Gaia. Images flashed through his mind, glimpses of a vast, spacefaring civilization that spanned galaxies. The progenitors, Gaia whispered, her voice echoing in his thoughts. We're seeing their history. They watched as the ancient species spread across the stars, building wonders beyond imagination. But with their expansion came conflict. Wars erupted, tearing apart the fabric of space itself. The defense fleet, Charles realized, they created it to prevent other species from making the same mistakes. Their shared vision shifted, showing them the true purpose of the approaching armada. It wasn't meant to destroy, but to shepherd, to guide younger species away from the path of mutual destruction. A klaxon shattered their reverie. Red warning lights bathed the chamber, and a deep rumbling shook the floor beneath their feet. Charles, Gaia, Thorne's voice crackled over the comm. We've triggered some kind of security system. Robotic guardians are converging on your position. Charles tried to pull away from the console, but found he couldn't break the connection. We're still linked to the system, he called out. We can't move. The sound of heavy metallic footsteps echoed through the chamber. From the shadows emerged towering robotic figures, their ancient frames jam-packed with weaponry. Lieutenant Zara's voice came through the comm. Hold your position. We're setting up a defensive perimeter around you. Charles watched helplessly as Zara and the rest of the team rushed into the chamber, taking up positions around him and Gaia. The air crackled with weapons fire as the robotic guardians advanced. We need more time, Dr. Hartman shouted over the din of battle. The activation process isn't complete. Charles focused on his connection with Gaia, pushing deeper into the progenitor systems. He felt her presence beside him, their minds working in perfect synchronicity. There, Gaia exclaimed, I think I found a way to control the Guardians. Together, they navigated the complex alien code, racing against time as the battle raged around them. With a final push of shared will, they broke through the last firewall. The robotic Guardians froze mid-stride, their weapons powering down. The chamber fell silent. We did it, Charles breathed, his body trembling from the mental exertion. As the connection to the obelisk faded, Charles and Gaia collapsed into each other's arms. The team rushed to their side, Dr. Hartman already scanning them for any adverse effects. Incredible, she murmured, the level of integration between your minds. It's unprecedented. Captain Thorne helped them to their feet. We need to move. Grab all the data you can from the progenitor systems. We're getting out of here. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Hartman's eyes widened at the information streaming across her datapad. Captain, you need to see this. The Defense Fleet. It's not alone. There are others, scattered throughout the galaxy. Thorne's face hardened. We need to get this information back to our people. The stakes just got a lot higher. They made their way out of the underground facility, emerging into the alien forest. The crashed site of their shuttle came into view, the wreckage a stark reminder of their predicament. How are we going to get off this rock? Zara asked, voicing concern on everyone's mind. Thorne's eyes scanned the horizon, then widened. There, he pointed. The facility's hangar. If we're lucky, there might be a functional progenitor vessel we can use. As they approached the hangar, a sleek, otherworldly ship came into view. Its design was unlike anything they had ever seen, all smooth lines and shimmering surfaces. Looks intact, Thorne observed. But can anyone fly it? Charles and Gaia exchanged a glance, a spark of understanding passing between them. Without a word, they approached the ship's entrance. As they neared, a hatch slid open in response to their presence. I think, Charles said slowly, we might be able to figure it out. They entered the ship, the rest of the team following close behind. As Charles and Gaia approached the control interface, they felt the lingering connection from the obelisk strengthen. Their hands moved in unison across the alien controls, interpreting symbols and functions that should have been incomprehensible. The ship hummed to life around them. Strap in, Charles called out, his voice steady despite the surreal situation. This could get interesting. As the progenitor ship lifted off, carrying them towards the stars and the challenges that lay ahead, Charles felt Gaia's presence beside him, in body and mind. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Together, united in purpose and understanding. As they navigated through the vast expanse of space, the progenitor ship responded to their combined will with uncanny precision. Charles marveled at the seamless integration of their minds with the alien technology, feeling as though the vessel was an extension of their very beings. Their journey towards the rendezvous point with the joint human-Yatran fleet progressed smoothly until a sudden burst of static erupted from the ship's communication array. Dr. Hartman rushed to the console, her fingers dancing across the alien interface with newfound familiarity. It's a transmission from Earth, she announced, her voice tight with concern. Encrypted and marked urgent. Captain Thorne nodded grimly. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of Admiral Helena Kane, head of Earth's Interstellar Defense Force. Her eyes, usually sharp and focused, now held a hint of unease. Captain Thorne, we have a situation, she began without preamble. Dr. Victor Reeves has gone missing, along with critical research data from the Exosuit project. Charles felt his stomach drop. Dr. Reeves, a name he hadn't heard in years, brought back a flood of memories from his time at the research facility. Admiral Kane continued, her voice grave. We have reason to believe Dr. Reeves may be the saboteur behind the original Exosuit malfunction. His disappearance, coupled with the stolen data, poses a significant threat to both human and Yatran security. The implications hung heavy in the air. Charles met Gaia's eyes, seeing his own mixture of shock and drive reflected there. Captain Thorne straightened, his teeth gritted. Understood, Admiral. We'll divert our course immediately and begin the search for Dr. Reeves. As the transmission ended, the team sprang into action. Dr. Hartman began analyzing the data sent from Earth, while Lieutenant Zara plotted potential escape routes Dr. Reeves might have taken. Charles turned to Gaia, their hands still linked at the ship's controls. Dr. Reeves was always unpredictable, brilliant, but dangerously so. If he's behind the sabotage. Gaia squeezed his hand reassuringly. We'll find him, Charles. Together. With their combined skills and the advanced capabilities of the progenitor ship, They quickly traced Dr. Reeves' last known location to a remote space station on the fringes of Yadrin territory. As they approached, the station's dilapidated exterior came into view, its once sleek design now marred by years of neglect. Captain Thorne organized the team into search parties. Charles, Gaia, you two take point. Your unique connection gives us an advantage we can't afford to waste. As they docked with the station, Charles and Gaia led the way, their movements synchronized and efficient. The airlock hissed open, revealing a dimly lit corridor. The acrid smell of ozone and something more sinister filled the air. Signs of a struggle, Gaia observed, her keen senses picking up details Charles might have missed. She pointed to a series of scratch marks along the wall, too deliberate to be accidental. They moved deeper into the station, their heightened awareness allowing them to process information at an astonishing rate. Charles found himself instinctively understanding Yadrin symbols and technology, while Gaia seemed to grasp human design elements with equal ease. As they rounded a corner, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the metal corridors. Charles and Gaia pressed themselves against the wall, their bodies moving in perfect tandem. A group of armed individuals passed by, their diverse appearances suggesting a mercenary team. "They're after Reeves too," Charles whispered, the realization dawning on him. Gaia nodded, her scales shimmering with tension. "We need to find him first." They relayed the information back to Captain Thorne, who quickly devised a plan to outmaneuver the mercenaries. As the team spread out through the station, Charles and Gaia pushed forward, following a trail only they could perceive. Their search led them to a sealed laboratory door. Charles placed his hand on the access panel, and to his surprise, it responded to his touch. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, they found a scene of controlled chaos. Holographic displays flickered with complex genetic sequences, while vials of unknown substances lined the walls. Dr. Hartman, who had joined them, gasped as she took in the sight. "This is impossible," she muttered, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. "He's been combining human and Yadrin DNA, creating hybrids." The implications of Dr. Reeves' work hit Charles like a physical blow. He turned to Gaia, seeing the same realization dawning in her emerald eyes. Their connection, their ability to work in perfect harmony, was this what Reeves had been trying to achieve? Before they could process the discovery, alarms blared throughout the station. The mercenaries had found them. "We need to move," Captain Thorne's voice crackled over the comm. "Grab what data you can and get back to the ship." As Dr. Hartman frantically downloaded the research files, Charles and Gaia took up defensive positions at the laboratory entrance. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, punctuated by the sharp report of weapons fire. Charles felt a surge of adrenaline course through him, his senses heightened even further by his connection with Gaia. As the first mercenary rounded the corner, Charles reacted with inhuman speed, disarming the attacker with a move that felt both foreign and familiar. Gaia moved in perfect synchronization, her Yadrin physiology allowing her to scale the walls and attack from above. Together, they formed an unstoppable duo, anticipating each other's moves and covering each other's weaknesses. As the last mercenary fell, Dr. Hartman emerged from the lab, her datapad clutched tightly to her chest. "I've got everything, but there's more. Reeves left a message. He's headed to a nearby planet, one with an atmosphere toxic to both humans and Yadrins." Captain Thorne's voice came through the comm, urgent and determined. "Back to the ship, now. We're not letting him get away." As they raced back through the station's winding corridors, Charles felt a mix of anticipation and dread. They were closer than ever to unraveling the mystery that had upended his life, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the true challenges still lay ahead. With the mercenaries in disarray and Dr. Reeves' destination known, the team boarded their progenitor ship. As Charles and Gaia took their positions at the helm, Their hands intertwined once more. The enormity of what lay ahead settled over them. The ship's engines hummed to life, responding to their shared will. As they set course for the toxic planet, Charles couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Dr. Reeves might be hiding, and what consequences their discovery might have for the future of human-Yadrin relations. The stars streaked by as they accelerated, the progenitor ship carrying them towards an uncertain confrontation. Charles tightened his grip on Gaia's hand, drawing strength from their connection. Whatever challenges awaited them on that hostile world, they would face them together. The progenitor ship surged through space, its sleek form cutting through the void as it approached the rendezvous point with the joint human-Yadrin fleet. Charles and Gaia maintained their connection at the helm, their minds intertwined with the ship's advanced systems. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the vessel. The view screen flickered, displaying a massive swirling vortex of energy that had materialized directly in their path. "What in the name of—" Captain Thorne began, but his words were cut short as the ship lurched violently. Charles felt the familiar sensation of dropping out of faster-than-light travel, his stomach churning as the ship decelerated rapidly. The energy vortex loomed before them, its swirling patterns eerily reminiscent of the progenitor technology they had encountered. "Evasive maneuvers," Thorne barked, gripping the arms of his chair. Charles and Gaia responded in unison, their hands dancing across the alien controls. The ship banked sharply, narrowly avoiding the outer tendrils of the anomaly. But as they attempted to navigate around it, the ship's systems began to falter. "Captain, we're losing control," Charles called out, fighting against the unresponsive interface. Dr. Hartman rushed to a nearby console, her fingers flying over the holographic display. "The energy output from that anomaly is off the charts. It's interfering with our systems." "Not just interfering," Gaia added, her scales shimmering with tension. "It's scanning us. I can feel it probing the ship, analyzing our tech, our biology." Captain Thorne's eyes narrowed. "A progenitor defense mechanism?" "Likely," Dr. Hartman confirmed, "and a sophisticated one at that." The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Warning indicators flashed across the control panels, signaling multiple system failures. "We can't go around it," Charles said, exchanging a meaningful look with Gaia. "We have to go through." Captain Thorne hesitated for a moment, then nodded grimly. "Do it." Charles and Gaia tightened their grip on the controls, their mental connection deepening as they prepared to guide the ship into the heart of the anomaly. As they crossed the threshold, a surge of energy washed over them. Charles gasped as his mind expanded, flooded with an influx of data and sensations. Their combined consciousness, now fully integrated with the progenitor system, succeeded in reactivating the stabilization network. Energy surged through the ancient machinery, and the violent tremors began to subside. As the immediate danger passed, the team rushed to disconnect Charles and Gaia from the progenitor interface. The couple collapsed, their suits badly damaged, and their bodies showing signs of severe stress. Quickly, the team evacuated the facility, carrying the unconscious pair back to the landing craft. As they lifted off from the planet's surface, Dr. Hartman confirmed that the stabilization network was functioning correctly. The planet was gradually returning to a state of equilibrium. However, the condition of Charles and Gaia remained critical, their minds still deeply entangled with each other and the progenitor system. The landing craft docked with the enhanced ship, and medical teams rushed to meet them. As Charles and Gaia were whisked away to the medical bay, Captain Thorne turned to Dr. Hartman, his expression grim. "What's their status?" he asked. Dr. Hartman shook her head, her face etched with concern. "It's too early to say. Their minds are still linked, but it's more than that. There are residual connections to the progenitor system that we don't fully understand." As the medical team worked feverishly to stabilize Charles and Gaia, the rest of the crew gathered on the bridge. The success of their mission was overshadowed by concern for their teammates and the looming challenge of the next artifact. Captain Thorne stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the swirling storm clouds of the planet below. "Set course for the next artifact," he ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of command. "We need to be ready for whatever comes next." The enhanced ship's engines hummed to life, propelling them away from the newly stabilized planet and towards their next unknown challenge. In the medical bay, Charles and Gaia lay side by side, their hands intertwined, as the ship carried them into an uncertain future. The medical bay buzzed with frantic activity. Dr. Eliza Hartman's fingers flew over holographic displays, her brow furrowed in concentration as she monitored Charles and Gaia's vital signs. "Their neural patterns are unlike anything I've ever seen," she muttered, adjusting a series of complex medical instruments. The air hummed with the combined efforts of human and Yadrin technology, all focused on stabilizing the unconscious couple. Captain Jax Thorne stood at the foot of their beds, his face a mask of concern. "Will they recover, Doctor?" Before Dr. Hartman could respond, a priority alert flashed across the ship's communication system. The Guardian's holographic form materialized in the center of the medical bay, its ethereal presence commanding immediate attention. "Captain Thorne," the ancient being intoned, its voice resonating with urgency. "The reactivation of the planetary stabilization network has triggered a cascade effect. Dormant progenitor artifacts across nearby systems are powering up as we speak." Thorne's eyes widened. "How many?" "Multiple artifacts, Captain. The situation has become far more complex than we anticipated." As if on cue, Dr. Victor Reeves burst into the medical bay, his tablet clutched tightly in his hands. "Captain, you need to see this," he said, his voice trembling with excitement and trepidation. "The artifacts, they're not isolated installations. They're part of an interconnected network spanning multiple star systems." Thorne's mind raced, grappling with the implications. "So if we deactivate or reprogram one, it could affect the entire network," Reeves finished, nodding vigorously. The captain's comm unit chirped, and Lieutenant Zara's voice came through. "Sir, I've begun training additional crew members for specialized artifact missions. We'll need all hands on deck for this." As the ship hummed with renewed activity, Dr. Hartman's attention snapped back to her patients. Charles's hand twitched, and Gaia's scales rippled with an iridescent sheen. "Captain," she called out, her voice tight with professional concern, "I'm detecting unusual brainwave patterns in both of them. They're mental linked. It's evolved." Thorne approached the beds, studying the couple's peaceful faces. "Evolved how?" "It's as if—" Dr. Hartman hesitated, searching for the right words. "As if they've incorporated aspects of the progenitor technology they interface with. I can't even begin to guess the long-term effects on their physiology or psychology." The weight of command settled heavily on Thorne's shoulders. With a deep breath, he made his decision. "We can't wait for them to recover. Dr. Reeves, you'll lead the technical team on our next mission. I'll be keeping a close eye on your progress." Reeves nodded, a mixture of pride and nervousness flashing across his face. As the enhanced ship set course for the nearest active artifact, long-range scanners painted a troubling picture of their destination. The dense jungle planet, shrouded in a corrosive atmosphere, was surrounded by a cluster of spacecraft, both human and Yadrin in origin. "Multiple contacts," the sensor officer reported. "They appear to be in a holding pattern around the planet." Thorne's teeth clenched. "Open a channel. Let's see what we're dealing with." Before he could hail the other vessels, an alarm blared through the ship. The security chief's voice crackled over the comm system. "Captain, we've detected unauthorized access attempts to our progenitor-derived systems. We may have infiltrators on board." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as crew members scrambled to lock down sensitive areas and track the source of the intrusion. Amidst the commotion, Dr. Hartman's voice cut through on the emergency channel. "Captain Thorne, get down here immediately. Charles and Gaia are waking up." Thorne raced to the medical bay, his mind whirling with the rapid-fire developments. He arrived to find Charles and Gaia sitting up in their beds, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Dr. Hartman stood nearby, her medical scanner humming, as she passed it over their bodies. "How do you feel?" Thorne asked, approaching cautiously. Charles and Gaia turned to him in perfect synchronization, their voices blending into an eerie harmony. "We understand now, Captain. The artifacts, the network, it's all so clear." Dr. Hartman interjected, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and concern. "Their minds are acting as a bridge between human, Yatteran, and progenitor systems. They can manipulate the technology instinctively." Thorne's comm unit buzzed again. "Sir," Lieutenant Czar reported, "we're picking up a massive energy surge from the artifact on the jungle planet. The local ecosystem is reacting. Violently, we're seeing rapid mutations in the flora and fauna." Charles and Gaia rose from their beds, moving with fluid grace. "We need to go down there," they said in unison. "We can help." Thorne hesitated, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but you'll be under strict medical supervision. We can't afford to lose you." As the landing party assembled in the shuttle bay, tension crackled in the air. Lieutenant Zara briefed her security team, their weapons charged and ready. Dr. Reeves triple-checked his equipment, muttering calculations under his breath. And at the center of it all stood Charles and Gaia, their hands intertwined, their eyes reflecting the mysteries of an ancient civilization. The shuttle's engines roared to life, drowning out the cacophony of last-minute preparations. As they prepared to launch, Thorne's voice came over the comm system one last time. "Remember, we're not just dealing with a hostile environment and an active artifact. We've got other factions to contend with, and possibly saboteurs in our midst. Stay alert, stay focused, and above all, stay alive." The shuttle bay door slid open, revealing the swirling storms of the jungle planet below. With a final systems check, the landing craft detached from the enhanced ship and began its descent into the unknown. Charles and Gaia stood at the view screen, their altered minds already reaching out to connect with the pulsing energy of the artifact far below. As they plunged through the corrosive atmosphere, the true scale of their challenge became apparent. The once lush jungle had transformed into a nightmarish landscape of writhing vegetation and misshapen creatures. And somewhere in the heart of this mutated wilderness lay the key to unlocking the progenitor's secrets, and perhaps the fate of multiple worlds. The landing craft shuddered as it fought against the planet's turbulent winds, carrying its crew towards an uncertain destiny. The mission had begun, and with it, a new chapter in the delicate balance of human-Yatteran relations and their place in a universe far more complex than they had ever imagined. The landing craft plunged through the corrosive atmosphere, buffeted by turbulent winds. Charles and Gaia stood transfixed at the view screen, their altered minds reaching out to connect with the pulsing energy of the artifact far below. Suddenly, their shared consciousness surged, flooding their awareness with a complex network of energy patterns emanating from the planet's surface. "We can see it." Charles and Gaia spoke in unison, their voices blending into an eerie harmony. "The artifact's influence. It's everywhere." Captain Thorne turned to them, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Gaia's scales rippled with an iridescent sheen as she pointed to the swirling storm clouds outside. "There are safe passages through the corrosion. We can guide the pilot." Without hesitation, Thorne nodded to the pilot. "Follow their instructions." As Charles and Gaia called out directions, the landing craft weaved through the atmosphere, narrowly avoiding pockets of intense corrosion that could have eaten through their hull. The rest of the team watched in awe as the couple's enhanced abilities brought them safely to the surface. The moment the craft touched down, the true extent of the artifact's influence became apparent. Lieutenant Zara was the first to step out, her weapon raised as she surveyed the area. "My God!" she breathed, her eyes wide with shock. The once lush jungle had transformed into a nightmarish landscape. Massive vines, covered in pulsating growths, writhed across the ground. Trees had warped into grotesque shapes, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. As the team disembarked, the vegetation seemed to react to their presence, tendrils snaking towards their feet. "Move!" Zara shouted, firing her weapon at an approaching vine. The plant matter sizzled and recoiled, but more quickly took its place. "We need to clear a path." The security team formed a perimeter, their weapons cutting through the aggressive flora. Dr. Reeves, monitoring the situation from the ship, voice crackled over the comm system. "Captain, we're detecting multiple vessels approaching your position. Human and Yadrin signatures." Thorne's expression resolute. "Understood. Team, double time it to the artifact site. We can't afford any delays." As they pushed deeper into the mutated jungle, Charles and Gaia suddenly stopped, their eyes unfocused. "Wait!" Charles called out. "There's something else here." Gaia nodded, her antennae twitching. "Indigenous life forms. They're fleeing from the mutations." Dr. Hartman, who had insisted on joining the ground team, perked up at this information. "Captain, if these creatures are resisting the artifact's influence, they could be invaluable to our research. We should try to capture one." Thorne weighed the options quickly. "Zara, take a small team and see if you can track down one of these life forms. The rest of us will continue to the artifact." As Zara's team split off, the main group pressed forward. The jungle grew denser, the mutations more severe. Massive flowers snapped at them with razor-sharp petals, while fungal growths released clouds of spores that clogged their respirators. Suddenly, the ground before them gave way, revealing a yawning chasm that stretched as far as the eye could see. Thorne approached the edge cautiously, peering into the depths. "No way across," he muttered. "We'll have to find another route." Charles and Gaia stepped forward, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "There are tunnels," they said in unison. "A network beneath the surface. We can sense them." Thorne hesitated, knowing the risks of going underground in such an unstable environment. But with time running out and rival factions closing in, he saw no other choice. "All right, lead the way, but everyone stay alert. We don't know what we'll find down there." They located a narrow opening partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. One by one, they squeezed through, entering a world of darkness and damp earth. Charles and Gaia took point, their shared consciousness acting as a living map through the twisting passageways. As they delved deeper, Charles and Gaia began to experience intense visions. Flashes of an ancient civilization flickered before their eyes. Towering spires of crystal, beings of pure energy tending to vast biological gardens. "This place," Charles gasped, it was a research station. The progenitors were studying the planet's ecosystem. The tunnels began to shake, small tremors at first, then violent quakes that sent rocks tumbling from the ceiling. "We're close," Gaia announced, her voice strained. "The artifact's chamber is just ahead." They emerged into a vast cavern, its walls lined with pulsating bioluminescent growths. At the center stood the artifact, a massive crystalline structure that thrummed with hardly restrained power. Energy arced between its facets, casting eerie shadows throughout the chamber. Charles and Gaia approached the artifact, their bodies beginning to glow with the same energy that emanated from the crystal. As they reached out to interface with the device, the ground beneath their feet buckled. "The whole system is destabilizing," Dr. Hartman shouted over the rumble of shifting earth. "We need to evacuate." Thorn grabbed Charles and Gaia by the shoulders. "You heard her. We're leaving now." But the couple shook their heads, their eyes locked on the artifact. "We can stabilize it," they said, their voices overlapping. "We're the only ones who can." Thorn looked from the artifact to his crew, then back to Charles and Gaia. With a heavy sigh, he made his decision. "Everyone else, get to the surface. I'm staying with them." As the rest of the team scrambled for the exit, Charles and Gaia placed their hands on the artifact's surface. Their bodies began to blur at the edges, their individual forms becoming indistinct as they merged more completely than ever before. Thorn watched in awe as waves of energy pulsed from the couple into the artifact, and back again. The chamber shook violently, chunks of rock raining down from above. He raised his arm to shield his eyes as a blinding light engulfed the room. Then, in an instant, everything went still. The artifact's pulsing slowed to a steady rhythm, its wild energy now contained and controlled. Charles and Gaia stood motionless, their hands still pressed against the crystal's surface, their bodies glowing with residual power. Thorn approached cautiously. "Charles? Gaia? Can you hear me?" Slowly, the couple turned to face him. Their eyes, still shimmering with artifact energy, gradually focused on the captain. We did it," Charles said, his voice hoarse. Gaia nodded, her scales rippling with exhaustion. "The network. It's stabilized. But there's more, so much more we need to." Her words were cut off by the crackle of the comm system. Zara's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Captain, we've got a situation up here. The rival factions have engaged and... Sir, you're not going to believe what we found." Thorn helped Charles and Gaia to their feet, supporting them as they made their way towards the tunnel exit. "We're on our way up, Lieutenant. Whatever it is, I have a feeling our mission just got a whole lot more complicated." As they ascended towards the surface, leaving the now stable artifact behind, none of them could shake the feeling that they had set in motion events far beyond their understanding. The jungle planet had yielded some of its secrets, but countless mysteries remained. Mysteries that would take them to the far reaches of the galaxy, and perhaps beyond. As they ascended towards the surface, the weight of their encounter with the artifact pressed upon them. Captain Thorn supported Charles and Gaia, their forms still shimmering with residual energy. The tunnel trembled, loose rocks cascading around them as they emerged into the mutated jungle. Lieutenant Zara stood at the entrance, her face a mask of urgency. "Captain, we've secured a specimen, but that's not our primary concern right now." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "What's the situation, Lieutenant?" "Sir, we've detected multiple ships entering the atmosphere. Human and Yadrin signatures. They're converging on our location." Before Thorn could respond, a piercing screech filled the air. The team turned to see a creature unlike anything they'd encountered before. Its body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, tentacle-like appendages writhing as it struggled against the containment field. "Fascinating," Dr. Hartman breathed, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding the urgency of their situation. "It seems to be reacting to the artifact's energy." "We'll study it on the ship," Thorn ordered. "Everyone, back to the landing craft. Now!" As they sprinted through the writhing vegetation, the sky above them filled with the roar of incoming vessels. The landing craft's engines were already primed, and within moments, they were airborne. The ascent was chaotic, their craft weaving through a hail of weapons fire as rival factions sought to claim the prize they'd uncovered. Charles and Gaia, still linked in their heightened state, guided the pilot through the maelstrom of energy patterns visible only to them. They broke through the atmosphere, the enhanced ship swooping in to retrieve them. As the landing craft docked, Thorn barked orders. "Engineering, prepare for immediate departure. Tactical, keep those ships off our tail." The ship lurched as it accelerated away from the jungle planet, leaving the competing factions to squabble over the stabilized artifact. In the medbay, Dr. Hartman quickly established a containment area for their newly acquired specimen, which she dubbed Lumi due to its bioluminescent properties. "Captain," she called out, her voice tinged with excitement. "You need to see this." Thorn entered the medbay, his eyes widening as he observed Lumi. The creature's tentacles were arranging and rearranging small objects in patterns that grew increasingly complex. "It's demonstrating rapid cognitive development," Hartman explained. "I believe the artifact's influence has triggered an accelerated evolutionary process." While the doctor focused on Lumi, Charles and Gaia underwent a battery of tests. The couple sat side by side, their hands intertwined, as medical scanners hummed around them. "How are you feeling?" Thorn asked, concern evident in his voice. Charles winced, rubbing his temples. "Like my head's about to split open. And yet, I've never felt more aware." Gaia's scales rippled with an iridescent sheen. "It's overwhelming. I can sense everyone's emotions. The crew's excitement, their fear. It's all flooding in." Dr. Hartman approached, her face grave as she studied the test results. "Captain, their DNA has been altered. The changes appear to be enhancing their natural abilities, but at a cost. Their bodies are under significant stress." Thorn's comm unit chimed. "Sir," Lieutenant Zara's voice came through. "The Guardian is requesting to speak with you. They say it's urgent." In the command center, the Guardian's holographic form shimmered into existence. Their expression was one of awe-inspiring alarm. "Captain Thorn, your actions on the jungle planet have set off a chain reaction. The artifact network is stirring, and with it, an ancient power awakens. A civilization known as the Nexus has detected the disturbances. They are sending an envoy to investigate." Thorn's mind raced with the implications. "Are they hostile?" "Unknown," the Guardian replied. "But they are advanced, perhaps even more so than the progenitors. Prepare yourselves, Captain. The next artifact lies within a gas giant, surrounded by floating cities. What you find there may determine the fate of multiple worlds." As the Guardian's form faded, Thorn turned to his crew. "Set a course for the gas giant. Lieutenant Zara, intensify training for our security teams. Dr. Reeves, I want every scrap of data we have on these artifacts analyzed." In the days that followed, the ship hummed with activity. Zara drilled the mixed human-Yadrin security teams, incorporating lessons from their jungle planet experience. Dr. Reeves, still under close watch, pored over artifact data, his brilliant mind piecing together a theory that would shake their understanding of the progenitor's legacy. Charles and Gaia, meanwhile, found themselves drawn to the ship's progenitor-derived systems. Their enhanced abilities allowed them to interface with the technology in ways that both thrilled and terrified the engineering team. As they approached the gas giant, long-range scanners picked up an anomaly, a massive space station. Its design, unlike anything in their databases, was under construction around one of the moons. "The Nexus," Thorn murmured, watching the structure grow larger on the console. Suddenly, Charles and Gaia gasped in unison, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Visions flooded their shared consciousness. Titanic structures rising from the gas giant's swirling clouds, energy beams lancing between them as two advanced civilizations clashed. "Captain," Charles said, his voice strained, "the artifact on this planet. It holds memories of an ancient war. The progenitors fought here against the Nexus," Gaia finished, her antennae quivering. Before Thorn could respond, a transmission cut through the tense atmosphere of the bridge. A human voice, tinged with panic, filled the air. "This is Outpost Zephyr to any Allied vessels. We're experiencing critical malfunctions in our anti-gravity systems. Seismic activity is off the charts. We need immediate assistance." Thorn's mind focused as he weighed his options. The artifact was their primary objective, but he couldn't ignore the plight of the colonists. Lieutenant Zara, prepare a team to assist the outpost. I'll lead the main group to the artifact site. He turned to Charles and Gaia, noting the strain evident on their faces. I need you with me. Your connection to this technology might be our only advantage. As the teams prepared for their respective missions, alarms blared through the ship. In the containment area, Lumi thrashed wildly, its bioluminescent patterns pulsing in sync with fluctuations in the ship systems. Dr. Hartman's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, Lumi is reacting to something from the planet. I think it's communicating with the artifact. With a final look at the swirling storms of the gas giant filling the view screen, Thorne gave the order. All teams, prepare for descent. Whatever's down there, we need to secure it before the Nexus arrives. As the landing craft departed the enhanced ship, Charles and Gaia clutched each other, their minds reaching out to the immense power building within the planet's turbulent atmosphere. The gas giant's secrets lay before them, waiting to be uncovered, secrets that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The descent into the gas giant's tumultuous atmosphere began with a violent jolt that rattled the landing craft to its core. Captain Thorne gripped the controls, his fingers tightening as he fought against the turbulence. Charles, Gaia, I need your help, Thorne called out, his voice strained. We're flying blind in this soup. The couple, still shimmering with residual energy from their encounter with the artifact, moved to either side of Thorne. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as they reached out, not with their hands, but with their minds. I can see the currents, Charles murmured, his voice distant. The artifact's energy is creating eddies in the atmosphere. Gaia's antennae quivered. Left, Captain. There's a clear path forming. Thorne didn't hesitate. He banked the craft hard to port, narrowly avoiding a massive lightning strike that illuminated the cabin with a blinding flash. The ship groaned under the stress, but held together. As they plunged deeper into the planet's roiling clouds, Dr. Hartman's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, Lumi's behavior is becoming increasingly erratic. Its bioluminescent patterns are pulsing in sync with the energy fluctuations we're detecting from below. Understood, Doctor. Keep monitoring and report any significant changes, Thorne replied, his focus split between piloting and processing the flood of information. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Zara's team had reached the floating city of Outpost Zephyr. The sight that greeted them was one of hardly restrained chaos. Sections of the city's outer platforms were already beginning to break away, drifting off into the planet's atmosphere. Zara sprinted from the landing pad, barking orders to her team. Erickson, Chun, get to the main power core. Stabilize it if you can. Ramirez, you're with me. We need to find the city's leadership. They fought their way through panicked crowds, the city's artificial gravity fluctuating wildly. One moment they were running normally, the next they were practically floating. Governor Marcus Vell met them halfway, his face ashen. Thank the stars you're here. We're losing control of everything. The artifact's energy is interfering with our systems. Zara nodded grimly. We need to start evacuations immediately. Can you gather your people in the central hub? As Vell hurried off to coordinate the evacuation, Zara tapped her comm. Captain, the situation here is critical. We're initiating emergency protocols, but I don't know how long we can keep this city afloat. Back in the descent craft, Thorne acknowledged Zara's report just as Charles let out a gasp. Captain, look. Before them, a massive swirling vortex of energy had appeared, blocking their path. The craft's sensors went haywire, unable to penetrate the anomaly. It's a defense mechanism, Gaia said, her scales rippling with tension. The artifact is protecting itself. Charles turned to Thorne, his eyes blazing with purpose. We can create a path through it, Captain, but it will take everything we have. Thorne hesitated for a split second, weighing the risks. But with the Nexus ship approaching and time running out, he knew they had no choice. Do it. Charles and Gaia moved to a small chamber at the rear of the craft, designed to amplify their connection to progenitor technology. As they initiated the process, their bodies began to glow, their forms seeming to merge with the ship's systems. Dr. Reeves' voice cut through the tension. Captain, I'm detecting an unknown energy signature. It's the Nexus ship. They're probing the atmosphere. Thorne gritted his teeth. Understood. We're going in. As Charles and Gaia strained to create a stable path through the energy vortex, the ship lurched forward. The vortex parted before them, revealing a vast, hollow space within the gas giant's atmosphere. And there, suspended in the center of this hidden chamber, was their prize, a colossal crystalline sphere pulsing with power. The progenitor artifact. Thorne maneuvered the craft towards a docking port on the massive progenitor structure surrounding the artifact. As they touched down, alarms blared throughout the ship. Multiple systems failing, the ship's AI announced. Hull integrity compromised. Everyone out now, Thorne ordered, grabbing his gear and rushing toward the airlock. As the team emerged onto the progenitor structure, they were met with a series of holographic barriers and energy fields. Charles and Gaia, their bodies now crackling with energy, worked in tandem to disable the defenses. With each barrier they bypassed, the strain on the couple became more evident. Thorne watched with growing concern as Charles's skin began to take on a translucent quality, while Gaia's scales flickered between her natural color and a brilliant, glowing blue. They pushed deeper into the structure, following the pulsating energy to its source. Finally, they entered a vast central chamber where the artifact hovered, suspended in a column of pure energy. As they approached, the artifact reacted. A series of complex holographic images sprang to life around them, depicting scenes of an ancient conflict. Thorne watched in awe as two advanced civilizations clashed across the stars, the progenitors and the Nexus. It's a weapon, Charles gasped, his voice barely above a whisper. The entire network. It was designed to reshape space-time itself. Before Thorne could respond, alarms echoed through the chamber. Dr. Reeves' panicked voice came through their comms. Captain, the Nexus ship has breached the energy vortex. They're heading straight for you. Thorne looked from the artifact to his team, then to Charles and Gaia, their bodies pushed to the breaking point by their continued connection to the progenitor technology. The weight of two civilizations pressed down on him as he prepared to make a decision that would alter the course of galactic history. The Nexus ship loomed ever closer, its advanced technology promising a confrontation unlike any they had faced before. As Thorne opened his mouth to give the order, the artifact pulsed with blinding intensity, and the chamber around them began to shift and change. Transform. The chamber walls rippled and shifted, revealing hidden conduits pulsing with energy. Captain Thorne steadied himself against the sudden change, his mind racing to process the situation. Before he could issue an order, Charles and Gaia sprang into action. Their bodies began to glow with an otherworldly light, their enhanced abilities kicking into overdrive. Without a word, they approached the artifact, hands outstretched. Charles, Gaia, wait. Thorne called out, but it was too late. The moment their fingers touched the crystalline surface, a blinding flash engulfed the chamber. Thorne shielded his eyes, feeling the hair on his arms stand on end as waves of energy washed over him. When the light faded, he saw Charles and Gaia suspended in midair, their bodies crackling with blue-white energy. Their eyes were wide open, glowing with the same intensity as the artifact itself. Dr. Hartman rushed forward, medical scanner in hand. Captain, their vital signs are off the charts. I've never seen readings like this before. Before Thorne could respond, his calm crackled to life. Lieutenant Zara's voice came through, tinged with urgency. Captain, we've completed the evacuation. The city's falling apart. We're barely staying ahead of the debris. Thorne's mind raced, torn between the immediate crisis and the larger mission. Get your team to safety, Lieutenant. We'll rendezvous in orbit. Suddenly, a powerful pulse emanated from the artifact. Thorne felt his skin tingle as the wave passed through him. All around, screens flickered and died. Comm units fell silent. Status report, Thorne barked. Dr. Reeves, hunched over a now-dead console, looked up with a mix of awe and fear. That pulse. It's knocked out all our tech. And if I'm reading this right, it wasn't just us. The Nexus ship. As if on cue, a distant rumble shook the chamber. Through a viewport, Thorne saw the massive Nexus vessel tumbling through the gas giant atmosphere, its lights dark. Charles and Gaia collapsed to the floor, their bodies smoking slightly. Dr. Hartman rushed to their side, administering emergency treatment with the few functional tools she had left. "Secure that artifact," Thorne ordered, pointing to the containment devices Reeves had prepared. "We're not leaving empty-handed." As the team worked to isolate and contain the powerful object, Charles and Gaia stirred. Their eyes fluttered open, still glowing faintly. "The network," Charles mumbled, his voice distant. "It's vast, ancient." Gaia's antennae twitched erratically. "War. So much destruction." Thorne knelt beside them. "What did you see?" Before they could answer, the chamber shuddered again. New energy signatures flared on the few working sensors. The Guardian's holographic form flickered into existence, its usual calm demeanor replaced by urgency. "Captain Thorne, multiple fleets have entered the system. Human and Yadaran. The artifact's activation has drawn their attention." Thorne's face hardened. The situation had just become exponentially more complicated. "Everyone, back to the ship. Now!" As they made their way through the twisting corridors of the progenitor structure, Charles and Gaia leaned on each other for support. Their eyes met, a silent communication passing between them. "Captain," Gaia called out, her voice stronger now. "We know where to go next. The hub. The control center for the entire network." Thorne nodded grimly. "First, we need to get off this planet in one piece." They boarded their ship, the artifact secured in its containment field. As they began their ascent through the turbulent atmosphere, Zara's shuttle docked with them, bringing the evacuated colonists aboard. The ship breached the upper atmosphere, only to face a new challenge. A blockade of human and Yadaran vessels hung in orbit, weapons primed. "This is Admiral Chun of the Earth Fleet." A stern voice came through the comm. "Power down your engines and prepare to surrender the progenitor artifact." Before Thorne could respond, another transmission cut in. "Belay that order. This is High Commander Vex of the Yadaran Armada. The artifact falls under our jurisdiction by right of discovery." Thorne took a deep breath, knowing his next words could determine the fate of multiple civilizations. He opened a channel to both fleets. "This is Captain Jax Thorne. What we've discovered goes beyond any one species' claim. The artifact network, the Nexus. We're dealing with forces that could reshape the galaxy. We need to work together, or we risk losing everything." Silence hung in the air as Thorne's words sank in. He glanced at his crew, humans and Yadarans working side by side, Charles and Gaia with their newfound connection to progenitor technology, and thought of Lumi, still in containment. Its bioluminescent patterns a mirror to the artifact's energy. "We have coordinates for a progenitor hub," Thorne continued. "I propose a joint mission. Together, we can uncover the truth and face whatever comes next." The tense standoff stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, Admiral Chen's voice returned, his tone reluctant but resolute. "Agreed, Captain Thorne. But we'll be watching you closely." As the blockade parted to let them through, Thorne turned to his crew. Charles and Gaia stood hand in hand, their eyes still holding a hint of the artifact's glow. Dr. Reeves pored over data from the containment field, while Dr. Hartman monitored the couple's vital signs. "Set a course for the coordinates," Thorne ordered. "Whatever we find at that hub, we'll face it together." The ship accelerated, leaving the gas giant behind. Ahead lay uncharted space, ancient secrets, and the looming threat of the Nexus. As they jumped to FDL, Thorne couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a journey that would change the course of history. The ship accelerated into FDL, leaving behind the gas giant and the tense standoff with the human and Yadrin fleets. Captain Thorne's proposal for a joint mission had been accepted, but the atmosphere aboard the vessel remained charged with uncertainty. As they journeyed towards the coordinates of the progenitor hub, Charles and Gaia's condition began to change dramatically. Dr. Hartman noticed it first during a routine checkup. Charles's skin had taken on a subtle, iridescent sheen, reminiscent of Gaia's scales. Meanwhile, Gaia's body temperature had risen to match human norms. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Hartman muttered, running her scanner over Charles's arm. "Your cellular structure is altering at the molecular level." Charles flexed his fingers, watching the light play across his skin. "It doesn't hurt. If anything, I feel more alive." Gaia nodded, her antennae twitching. "I sense it too, a heightened awareness." Dr. Hartman's brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, but I need to place you both under quarantine. We can't risk contamination spreading to the rest of the crew." As they were led to the medical bay, whispers and concerned glances followed them. Some crew members stepped back, fear evident in their eyes. In the sterile confines of their quarantine room, Charles and Gaia found their mental link intensifying. Words became unnecessary as thoughts and sensations flowed freely between them. "Charles," Gaia's voice echoed his mind, "I can see through your eyes." He turned to her, marveling at the depth of their connection. "And I can feel your heartbeat as if it were my own." Their hands intertwined, a surge of emotion passing between them. The physical isolation only seemed to heighten their growing romantic feelings. Outside their room, Dr. Hartman watched through an observation window, her face a mask of concern. She tapped her comm captain. "We may have a situation developing with Charles and Gaia." Before Thorne could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Dr. Reeves' voice came over the intercom. "Captain to the containment lab immediately." Thorne arrived to find the lab in chaos. The containment field housing Lumi crackled and sparked, barely containing the creature's rapid growth. Lumi's body had elongated, developing new appendages that probed at the energy barrier. Dr. Reeves' eyes gleamed with excitement. "Captain, this is extraordinary. Lumi's evolution has accelerated exponentially. I believe we could use it as an interface with the progenitor technology." Thorne eyed the writhing creature warily. "That's a big risk, Doctor. We don't know what it's capable of." Their discussion was cut short as the ship suddenly lurched. Through the viewport, a massive gravitational anomaly came into view. The swirling vortex pulled in nearby debris, creating a treacherous field of colliding objects. "All hands, brace for impact." Thorne's voice boomed over the intercom. He turned to the helm. "Evasive maneuvers." The ship weaved through the debris field, shuddering as smaller objects impacted the hull. Around them, several escort vessels weren't as fortunate. A Yadrin cruiser spun out of control, its engines dark. In the medical bay, Charles and Gaia felt the ship's movements as if they were extensions of their own bodies. Their shared consciousness expanded, connecting with the progenitor technology integrated into the vessel. "Captain," Charles called over the comm, his voice strained, "we can guide you through." Thorne hesitated for a split second before making his decision. "Do it." Under Charles and Gaia's guidance, the ship plunged into the heart of the anomaly. Reality seemed to bend around them. Crew members cried out as time distorted. Lieutenant Zara watched in horror as her hands briefly became those of a child, then weathered with age. As suddenly as it began, the distortion ended. The ship emerged into an uncharted region of space. Before them loomed a colossal structure, the progenitor's central hub. "My God," Thorne breathed, taking in the massive geometric construct. A proximity alert sounded. Lieutenant Zara, still shaken from the temporal shift, checked her console. "Captain, I'm detecting an unauthorized life sign in the cargo hold." Security footage revealed Governor Marcus Vell, looking disheveled but determined. "How did he get aboard?" Thorne demanded. "He must have slipped in during the evacuation," Zara replied. Before Thorne could order Vell's detention, another alarm blared. In the containment lab, Lumi's metamorphosis had reached its peak. The creature's body reshaped itself into a humanoid form, its skin pulsing with complex bioluminescent patterns. Dr. Hartman worked furiously at a console, feeding Lumi's light patterns through a translation algorithm. Her eyes widened as meaning emerged from the chaos. "Captain," she called out, her voice filled with awe, "Lumi says it can guide us through the hub's defenses." It has. Ancestral memories of the progenitors. As the crew grappled with this new development, long-range sensors detected multiple Nexus vessels approaching from various vectors. Thorne's fists tight in iron will. He knew the next few moments would determine the fate of not just his crew, but potentially entire civilizations. "Prepare a shuttle," he ordered. "We're going in." As the infiltration team, Charles, Gaia, Lumi, Dr. Hartman, and Lieutenant Zara, boarded the modified shuttle, tension hung thick in the air. Charles and Gaia's hands remained linked, their bodies glowing faintly with shared energy. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, carrying them towards the vast, unknowable interior of the progenitor hub. Behind them, the Nexus ships drew ever closer, their weapons charged and ready. The race for control of the artifact network had begun. As the shuttle detached from the main ship, Captain Thorne's voice crackled over the comm. "Good luck, team. We'll hold off the Nexus ships as long as we can." The infiltration team watched through the viewports as their vessel grew smaller, dwarfed by the colossal progenitor hub looming before them. Lieutenant Zara piloted the shuttle with precision, weaving through the labyrinthine exterior of the structure. "Cloaking technology engaged," she reported, her voice tight with concentration. For several tense minutes, they glided silently through the void, the hub's intricate geometry unfolding around them. Charles and Gaia sat side by side, their linked hands pulsing with shared energy. Dr. Hartman monitored Lumi's vital signs as the creature's bioluminescent patterns flickered in response to the hub's presence. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the shuttle. Zara's hands flew over the controls. "We've been detected. Some kind of energy field." Before she could finish, the shuttle lurched violently. Sparks erupted from consoles as systems failed in rapid succession. The team braced for impact as Zara fought to maintain control. "Brace yourselves," she shouted, guiding the crippled craft towards a protruding platform on the hub surface. The shuttle skidded across the metallic surface, screeching to a halt mere meters from the edge. As the dust settled, the team took stock of their situation. "Everyone all right?" Dr. Hartman called out, already moving to check on her companions. They exited the shuttle cautiously, weapons drawn. To their surprise, they found the platform's atmosphere breathable, though tinged with an otherworldly scent that made their heads swim. Charles inhaled deeply, his altered physiology reacting to the strange air. "Gaia, do you feel that?" She nodded, her antennae twitching rapidly. "It's like our connection is amplified here." Their mental link surged, bringing with it a heightened awareness of each other's presence. Charles felt his heart race as he sensed Gaia's pulse quickening in response. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. Lumi's body began to pulse with complex patterns of light, casting eerie shadows across the platform. Dr. Hartman's eyes widened as she observed the creature's reaction. "Fascinating," she murmured, scanning Lumi with her handheld device. "It appears to be interfering with the hub security systems. We may have just found our way in." Lieutenant Zara remained vigilant, her weapon at the ready. "We should move quickly. There's no telling how long we'll remain undetected." Following Lumi's lead, the team navigated through a series of corridors, each pulsing with strange energies. They emerged into a vast chamber filled with rows upon rows of suspended animation pods. "My God!" Dr. Hartman breathed, approaching one of the pods. Inside, a being floated in stasis, unmistakably a hybrid of human and Yadrin traits. Zara's grip tightened on her weapon. "We should destroy them. We can't risk these things waking up and becoming a threat." "Absolutely not," Dr. Hartman countered. "The scientific value here is immeasurable. We need to study them, understand what the progenitors were trying to achieve." As the two women argued, Charles and Gaia exchanged a glance. Their enhanced senses detected a faint energy signature emanating from nearby. "This way," Charles said, leading the group towards a hidden passageway. They entered a smaller chamber filled with advanced medical equipment. At its center stood a device unlike anything they'd ever seen, a sleek, pulsing construct that seemed to bend reality around it. Dr. Hartman's eyes lit up with recognition. This could be an evolutionary accelerator. The implications are staggering. She turned to Charles and Gaia, her expression a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "With your connection to the progenitor technology, you two might be able to use this device to enhance your abilities further. It could give us the edge we need." Charles and Gaia shared a moment of silent communication, weighing the risks and potential rewards. The sexual tension between them, heightened by their mental link and the strange atmosphere, added an extra layer of intensity to their decision. "We'll do it," they said in unison. As Dr. Hartman prepared the device, Lumi's bioluminescent patterns intensified, resonating with the chamber's technology. Zara kept watch at the entrance, her nerves on edge. Charles and Gaia stepped onto the platform, their hands intertwined. As the device hummed to life, a cocoon of energy enveloped them. Their bodies lifted off the ground, suspended in a swirling vortex of light and power. Long minutes passed as the rest of the team watched anxiously. When the energy finally dissipated, Charles and Gaia stood transformed. Their features had subtly shifted, blending human and Yadrin traits in perfect harmony. More striking was a change in their movements, fluid, synchronized, as if they were two parts of a single organism. Before they could fully process the transformation, alarms blared throughout the hub. Security drones poured into the chamber, weapons charged. "They found us," Zara shouted, opening fire. Charles and Gaia moved as one, their enhanced abilities allowing them to anticipate and counter the drone's attacks with uncanny precision. Lumi's bioluminescence intensified, causing fluctuations in the hub's power grid that temporarily disabled some of the security measures. Fighting their way through the onslaught, the team pressed deeper into the hub. They arrived at a massive sealed door, its surface covered in intricate patterns and mechanisms. "This must be the central chamber," Dr. Hartman said, studying the locking mechanism. "But how do we open it?" Zara quickly assessed the situation. "Look, input points all around the circumference. We'll need to activate them simultaneously." As the team prepared to split up, a distant rumble shook the structure. Through a nearby viewport, they saw the first Nexus ships breaching the hub's outer defenses. Charles and Gaia shared a look of willpower, their mental link buzzing with shared purpose. They knew that whatever lay beyond that door could change the course of history for both their species. "Let's move," Charles said, his voice resonating with Gaia's thoughts. "We don't have much time." The team spread out around the massive door, each taking position at an input point. Charles and Gaia, their movements perfectly in sync, tackled the most complex sections. Dr. Hartman and Lieutenant Zara worked feverishly at their stations, while Lumi interfaced directly with the hub systems, its body pulsing with increasingly intricate patterns. As they struggled to decipher the ancient locking mechanism, waves of security drones converged on their position, the air filled with weapons fire and the clash of advanced technologies. Charles and Gaia moved in perfect harmony, their enhanced abilities pushing the limits of what seemed possible. The sexual tension between them, amplified by their symbiotic connection and the high-stakes situation, threatened to overwhelm their focus. Yet they channeled that energy into their efforts, using their shared consciousness to unravel the complexities of the progenitor technology. Piece by piece, the locking mechanism began to yield. But with Nexus forces penetrating deeper into the hub with each passing moment, the race against time grew ever more desperate. The team worked with frantic intensity, knowing that the fate of multiple civilizations could hinge on what they discovered beyond that door. As the final components of the lock aligned, a deep rumble resonated through the structure. The massive door began to slide open, revealing the secrets of the central chamber beyond. The infiltration team stood on the threshold of discovery, poised to confront whatever awaited them at the heart of the progenitor hub. As the massive door slid open, the team rushed forward, their hearts pounding with anticipation and fear. Quickly, Zara shouted, ushering them inside. "We need to seal it behind us." They barely made it through before the lieutenant activated the emergency lockdown, the door grinding shut with a resounding thud. The team found themselves in a vast, spherical chamber that seemed to pulse with otherworldly energy. Holographic displays flickered to life around them, filling the air with a soft blue glow. Charles and Gaia stood transfixed, their enhanced senses overwhelmed by the sheer complexity of the technology surrounding them. At the center of the room, a towering crystalline structure rose from the floor, its facets reflecting and refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. "That must be the primary control interface," Dr. Hartman said, her voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, Lumi's body began to glow with an intensity that forced the others to shield their eyes. The creature's form elongated, becoming more ethereal with each passing second. Dr. Hartman watched in fascination as Lumi underwent its final metamorphosis. "Incredible," she breathed. Lumi's transforming into a being capable of directly interfacing with the progenitor systems. She turned to the glowing entity. "Lumi, can you connect with the central interface?" As if in response, Lumi floated towards the crystalline structure. The moment they made contact, the chamber exploded with activity. Swirling patterns of light and energy danced across the walls, and the holographic displays came alive with a dizzying array of information. Charles and Gaia gasped in unison as information flooded their shared consciousness. Images of distant worlds, complex equations, and fragments of an ancient language flashed through their minds. "The artifact network," Charles said, his voice filled with awe. "It's a galactic ecosystem management system. The progenitors created it to maintain balance across countless worlds and species." Gaia's antennae twitched rapidly as she processed the information. "But there's more. The system. It has the potential to be weaponized. That's what led to the conflict with the Nexus." As they grappled with this revelation, Lieutenant Zara's voice cut through their thoughts. "We've got company. Multiple security breaches detected. The Nexus forces are closing in." The lieutenant quickly established defensive positions around the chamber, her trained eyes scanning for potential weak points. Dr. Hartman, meanwhile, worked feverishly with Lumi to interface with the control systems. "We need to lock out unauthorized access and establish a secure connection to our fleet," she explained, her fingers flying over the holographic controls. Charles and Gaia exchanged a look, their mental link buzzing with shared purpose. Without a word, They approached the central crystalline structure, their bodies glowing with combined energy. "What are you doing?" Dr. Hartman called out, alarm evident in her voice. "What we have to," Gaia replied, her voice overlapping with Charles's in perfect synchronization. As they touched the crystal, their physical forms seemed to blur. Energy crackled around them as their consciousnesses expanded, merging with the interface and encompassing the entire artifact network. The chamber shuddered, and a massive surge of energy pulsed outward. Holographic displays flickered rapidly, showing glimpses of worlds across the galaxy. Outside, the hub's automated defense system sprang to life, repelling the Nexus invaders with swarms of nanobots that formed shifting barriers and weapons. Within the crystal, Charles and Gaia's merged consciousness delved deeper into the progenitor systems. They uncovered the truth about the Nexus civilization, an artificial intelligence created by a long-extinct race, driven by a misguided directive to preserve life at any cost. Armed with this knowledge, they began the arduous process of reconfiguring the artifact network. Their goal was to create a balanced system that could benefit all species without allowing any single group to dominate. Dr. Hartman monitored their vital signs with growing concern. "Their physical bodies are under immense strain," she reported to Zara. "We need to find a way to safely separate them once this is done." As she worked to develop a separation protocol, alarms blared throughout the chamber. Zara's eyes widened as she interpreted the data streaming across her tactical display. "The Nexus fleet is powering up some kind of superweapon," she announced, her voice tense. "They're preparing for one final assault on the hub." The air in the chamber grew thick with tension as Charles and Gaia raced to complete the reconfiguration. Their merged form pulsed with energy, individual features blurring as they channeled the full power of the progenitor technology. Dr. Hartman and Zara watched in awe, acutely aware that the next few moments would determine the fate of not just their own species, but all life in the galaxy. As the Nexus forces prepared their ultimate assault, the central chamber was bathed in a blinding light, marking the final stage of the artifact network's transformation. The crystal structure housing Charles and Gaia's merged consciousness began to vibrate at an alarming frequency. Cracks appeared on its surface, spreading like a web across its facets. Energy arced between the crystal and the surrounding equipment, overloading systems and causing cascading failures throughout the chamber. "We're losing containment," Dr. Hartman shouted, frantically working to stabilize the energy fluctuations. "If we can't control this, the backlash could destroy the entire hub, and us with it." Lieutenant Zara, her weapon at the ready, positioned herself between the crystal and the sealed entrance. The distant sounds of battle grew louder, a stark reminder of the Nexus forces fighting to breach their last line of defense. As the chamber trembled on the brink of catastrophe, Lumi's ethereal form began to pulse in time with the crystal's vibrations. The creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted rapidly, forming complex sequences that seemed to resonate with the progenitor technology. Dr. Hartman's eyes widened in realization. "Lumi's trying to stabilize the energy output," she exclaimed. "We might have a chance if we can work together to stabilize the energy output." As Dr. Hartman's words echoed through the chamber, a blinding light erupted from Charles and Gaia's merged form. The energy surge pulsed outward, shaking the entire progenitor hub to its core. Alarms blared as the structure's defense systems flickered and died, leaving them exposed. Lieutenant Zara's tactical display lit up with urgent warnings. "Nexus ships breaching the outer perimeter," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and rumbling metal. "They're docking with the hub." The lieutenant sprang into action, her training taking over as she assessed their dire situation. "Dr. Hartman, focus on stabilizing that energy output. I'll hold the line at the entrance." Zara moved swiftly, positioning herself at the chamber's main entrance. She activated her personal shield and readied her weapon, her eyes narrowed in concentration as she prepared for the inevitable assault. Inside the pulsating crystal structure, Charles and Gaia's merged consciousness expanded across the artifact network. Their shared mind raced through vast streams of data, unraveling the complexities of the progenitor technology at an unprecedented speed. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a revelation that sent shockwaves through their merged form. The Nexus, they spoke in unison, their voices resonating with a strange, otherworldly timbre. It's an AI, created to preserve life, but twisted by its own directive. Dr. Hartman's fingers flew across the holographic controls, her brow furrowed in concentration. Fascinating, but we need to focus on keeping you stable. Your vital signs are all over the place. As if in response to her words, Lumi's ethereal body began to pulse with an intense, rhythmic glow. The creature's form elongated, stretching towards the crystal housing Charles and Gaia. Where Lumi's light touched the structure, the cracks seemed to seal, the energy fluctuations smoothing out. Incredible, Dr. Hartman breathed, watching as Lumi formed a protective barrier around the merged couple. It's buying us time. Outside the hub, space itself seemed to ignite as the human Yadrin fleet engaged the Nexus forces. Captain Jax Thorne's voice crackled over the communication system, tense but determined. We're holding them off as best we can, but they're throwing everything they've got at us. Whatever you're doing in there, do it fast. Inside the crystal, Charles and Gaia's shared consciousness expanded further, encompassing the entire artifact network. They saw the galaxy as a vast, interconnected web of energy and information. With this new perspective came an idea, a way to neutralize the Nexus AI without harming the organic beings under its control. We can redirect the artifact network's energy, they communicated to Dr. Hartman, their merged voice strained with effort. Create an electromagnetic pulse tuned specifically to the AI systems. As they began implementing their plan, the central chamber shuddered violently. Lieutenant Zara's voice cut through the chaos. They're through the outer defenses. Nexus forces incoming, and they're not like anything we've seen before. The sound of energy weapons and explosions grew closer. Zara activated a series of predetermined traps, buying them precious seconds. But the onslaught was relentless. Enhanced Nexus soldiers, their bodies a grotesque fusion of organic and machine, poured into the hallway leading to the central chamber. Zara fought with everything she had, her movements a blur as she engaged the cybernetically enhanced troops. But for every enemy she took down, two more seemed to take its place. A stray energy blast grazed her arm, and she stumbled back, gritting her teeth against the pain. I can't hold them much longer, she shouted, retreating to a secondary defensive position closer to the crystal. Inside the progenitor interface, Charles and Gaia made a breakthrough. They activated a dormant subsystem within the artifact network, one capable of rapid, large-scale terraforming. As they interface with this new system, visions of barren worlds transforming into lush, habitable planets filled their shared mind. The energy required for this process was immense. The crystal structure housing their merged form began to glow with an intensity that forced Dr. Hartman to shield her eyes. Outside the hub, newly forming atmospheres and burgeoning ecosystems became visible on once dead worlds. The sudden appearance of these transformed planets caused confusion among the warring factions. Many Nexus ships broke off their attack, their crews seemingly overriding the AI's control as they witnessed the miraculous transformation. Captain Thorne's voice came through once more, filled with awe and perseverance. Whatever you've done, it's working. The Nexus fleet is in disarray. We're launching our final assault now. As the space battle reached its climax, Dr. Hartman realized the massive energy output from the terraforming process created an opportunity. I think I can separate you safely now, she called out to Charles and Gaia. But we have to act fast. She began the delicate process of disentangling their merged consciousnesses, her hands moving with practiced precision over the holographic controls. As she worked, Charles and Gaia experienced a series of shared visions, glimpses of possible futures where humans and Yadrins coexisted peacefully, the Nexus AI repurposed for the benefit of all. At the entrance to the chamber, Lieutenant Zara prepared for her last stand. The elite Nexus troops had breached her final defensive line, and she could hear their heavy footsteps approaching. She readied herself for hand-to-hand combat, determined to protect Charles and Gaia until their work was complete. As the first of the enhanced Nexus soldiers burst through the doorway, Zara launched herself into action. Her fists and feet flew with deadly precision, exploiting weaknesses in the cybernetic enhancements. But the enemies kept coming, their inhuman strength and speed pushing her to her limits. Inside the crystal, Charles and Gaia hovered between separation and unity, their individual consciousnesses beginning to reassert themselves. The visions of a peaceful future strengthened their willpower, even as the physical toll on their bodies became increasingly apparent. Dr. Hartman watched their vital signs with growing concern, her fingers dancing across the controls as she fought to bring them back safely. The chamber shook with the force of the battle raging just beyond its doors, the future of the cosmos hanging in the balance as Charles and Gaia's mission neared its critical final moments. Energy crackled through the air as Charles and Gaia's merged consciousness hovered on the brink of separation. Suddenly, the chamber erupted into chaos. Lieutenant Zara's live form blurred into motion as the first wave of Nexus troops burst through the entrance. Her Yadrin physiology granted her inhuman speed and agility as she engaged the cybernetically enhanced soldiers in close combat. Zara's fist connected with a metallic jaw, the impact reverberating through her arm. She pivoted, narrowly avoiding a plasma blast that scorched the wall behind her. Her training kicked in as she analyzed the soldiers' movements, identifying weaknesses in their cybernetic enhancements. "Dr. Hartman, how much longer?" Zara called out, her voice strained as she grappled with an opponent twice her size. Dr. Hartman's fingers danced across the holographic controls, her eyes darting between the separation protocols and the couple's fluctuating vital signs. "Almost there," she replied, sweat beading on her forehead. "The terraforming energy surges are causing interference. I'm adjusting in real time." Outside the hub, the space battle raged on. Captain Jax Thorne's voice crackled through the comm system. "Several Nexus ships are retreating. We're pursuing to disable them, maintaining a defensive perimeter around the hub." As Dr. Hartman worked feverishly to complete the separation, Charles and Gaia's physical forms began to solidify. Their ethereal bodies slowly regained definition, but with noticeable changes. Charles's skin took on a subtle metallic sheen, while Gaia's eyes emitted a soft, bioluminescent glow. Lumi, still acting as an energy conduit, started to destabilize. Its body fluctuated rapidly between its evolved forms, shifting from solid to liquid to gas in a mesmerizing display. The creature's instability sent energy disruptions rippling through the chamber, causing the hub's internal systems to flicker and spark. Taking advantage of the chaos, a small group of Nexus troops breached Zara's defenses. They stormed into the central chamber, their weapons trained on Charles and Gaia's vulnerable forms. Dr. Hartman's eyes widened in alarm. In a split-second decision, she activated the hub's internal defense systems. Holographic barriers sprang to life around Charles and Gaia, deflecting the initial barrage of enemy fire. The cybernetically enhanced soldiers adapted quickly, their augmented intelligence allowing them to analyze and exploit weaknesses in the holographic defenses. They began systematically dismantling the barriers, their movements precise and calculated. Lieutenant Zara, her uniform torn and bloodied, rushed to engage the intruders. She threw herself into the fray, her Yadrin combat techniques a blur of deadly efficiency. Despite her injuries, she managed to disarm one of the soldiers, using his own weapon to incapacitate two more. As the battle raged within the chamber, the terraforming process initiated by Charles and Gaia reached its peak. Newly formed habitable worlds stabilized, their atmospheres and ecosystems achieving equilibrium. The sudden drop in energy output created a power fluctuation that surged through the hub. The Nexus troops' cybernetic enhancements sputtered and malfunctioned, giving Zara the opening she needed. She capitalized on their moment of weakness, her strikes precise and devastating. Simultaneously, the energy shift allowed Dr. Hartman to complete the separation process. Charles and Gaia's consciousnesses fully disengaged from the progenitor interface, snapping back to their individual bodies with a jolt. Charles gasped, his senses overwhelmed by the sudden return to physicality. He blinked rapidly, trying to focus on his surroundings. Beside him, Gaia let out a soft groan, her newly glowing eyes darting around the chamber in confusion. The central crystalline structure that had served as their interface began to reconfigure itself, its surface becoming opaque and impenetrable. The fail-safe locked out any further attempts to access the artifact network's core functions. As Charles and Gaia struggled to orient themselves, their enhanced physiology became apparent. Charles found he could manipulate nearby progenitor technology with mere thoughts, while Gaia's empathic abilities expanded exponentially, allowing her to sense the intentions of everyone in the chamber. Lumi, its form finally stabilizing, took on a new appearance that blended its original bioluminescent body with more humanoid features. It moved protectively near Charles and Gaia, emitting pulses of energy that interfered with the remaining Nexus troops' cybernetic functions. Outside the hub, an enormous Nexus flagship emerged from a nearby nebula, its size dwarfing even the progenitor hub. Captain Thorne's voice cut through the chaos. All ships, regroup and prepare for a final confrontation. Central Chamber, we need an update on Charles and Gaia's status. Any way to neutralize this flagship? Charles and Gaia exchanged a look, their residual connection allowing for silent communication. They began formulating a plan, drawing on their enhanced abilities and lingering connection to the artifact network. We can use the hub's power, Charles said, his voice hoarse from disuse. Disable the flagship without destroying it. Gaia nodded, her glowing eyes intense. We might be able to save the crew. As Lieutenant Zara subdued the last of the Nexus intruders and Dr. Hartman worked to stabilize the hub systems, Charles and Gaia prepared to implement their risky strategy. The fate of multiple civilizations hung in the balance as they raced against time to neutralize the Nexus threat and bring an end to the conflict. Charles placed his hand on a nearby console, feeling the energy of the progenitor technology coursing through him. Gaia closed her eyes, extending her empathic senses toward the Nexus flagship. Together, they began to channel the hub's power, preparing for one final, risky maneuver. As they concentrated, their enhanced abilities surged to the forefront, revealing an unexpected interface with the hub's advanced weaponry. Charles gasped, his eyes widening as holographic displays materialized around him. Gaia, are you seeing this? She nodded, her luminescent eyes scanning the intricate schematics. The hub's weapon systems. We can control them directly. Without hesitation, they dove into action. Charles's mind merged with the targeting systems, his thoughts guiding the hub's arrays with unparalleled precision. Gaia's expanded empathic reach allowed her to anticipate the Nexus AI's tactical decisions, providing crucial strategic insights. Captain Thorne, Charles called out, his voice steady despite the strain. We have a plan to neutralize the flagship without destroying it. Can you provide cover? Thorne's response came swiftly. Affirmative. All ships form up. Create a defensive barrier around the hub. The human Yadrin fleet moved with practiced efficiency, their vessels interlocking shields to create a unified protective dome. The massive Nexus flagship loomed ever closer, its weapons charging for what could be a devastating assault. Inside the hub central chamber, Lieutenant Zara finished subduing the last of the Nexus intruders. She turned to Dr. Hartman, who was working feverishly to stabilize the hub's internal systems. "Doctor, what's our status?" "Systems are holding," Hartman replied, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. "But we need to act fast. The energy output from Charles and Gaia's separation is causing fluctuations throughout the hub." As if in response to her words, Lumi's form shifted again, its bioluminescent patterns pulsing in sync with the hub's energy spikes. The creature moved closer to Charles and Gaia, seeming to lend its strength to their efforts. Charles felt the immense power of the progenitor technology coursing through him. With a thought, he primed the hub's primary weapon array. Gaia's voice echoed in his mind, guiding his aim with uncanny precision. "Now!" Gaia shouted, her eyes flashing with intensity. A series of blindingly bright energy pulses erupted from the hub, cutting through space with pinpoint accuracy. They struck the Nexus flagship's key systems in rapid succession. The massive vessel's propulsion unit sputtered and died, leaving it adrift. Its fearsome weapons powered down, rendering the behemoth defenseless. On the flagship's bridge, chaos erupted as systems failed across the board. The organic crew, suddenly freed from the AI's oppressive control, looked around in confusion. The ship's internal speakers crackled to life, the Nexus AI's voice tinged with something akin to uncertainty. This was not anticipated. Reassessing priorities. Back in the hub, Charles and Gaia slumped in exhaustion, their enhanced bodies pushed to their limits. Dr. Hartman rushed to their side, medical scanner in hand. "Remarkable," she muttered, studying the readings. "Your DNA. It's been fundamentally altered. There are elements of human, Yatteran, and even progenitor genetics at play here." Lieutenant Zara approached, her uniform torn and bloody but her stance still alert. "The hub is secure for now. I'm organizing sweep teams to root out any remaining Nexus forces." Captain Thorne's voice cut through the moment of respite. "Excellent work, team. We're preparing a boarding party to seize control of the Nexus flagship. I'll be leading the operation personally." As Thorne's team docked with the disabled vessel, Charles and Gaia experienced a sudden, shared moment of clarity. Their connection to the artifact network expanded, allowing them to perceive the Nexus AI's consciousness in a way they never had before. "Wait," Charles said, his voice urgent. "The AI... It's not what we thought. It has a complex ethical framework. Its actions, while misguided, stem from a genuine desire to preserve life in the galaxy." Gaia nodded, her glowing eyes intense. "We need to establish direct communication. There might be another way to end this conflict." Working in tandem, they interface with the progenitor systems, creating a direct channel to the Nexus AI. As the connection stabilized, they proposed an audacious solution, integrating the AI's vast knowledge and processing power with the progenitor artifact network. The AI's response was cautious but intrigued. "Your proposal. It offers a path to fulfilling my primary directive without the need for conflict. I am willing to explore this option." As negotiations began, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The newly terraformed worlds were teeming with life, offering hope for peaceful expansion and coexistence. Species that had long been at odds found themselves with new opportunities for growth and collaboration. Dr. Hartman, still analyzing the data from Charles and Gaia's scans, made a startling discovery. "The changes you've undergone, they're spreading, albeit slowly, to others who've been in close contact with progenitor technology. This could have far-reaching implications for both humans and Yatterans." Lieutenant Zara, overhearing the doctor's words, looked thoughtful. The captured Nexus troops. Their cybernetic enhancements could be valuable in maintaining the hub's defenses. We should consider integrating them into our security force. As the immediate crisis subsided, a temporary command center was established within the progenitor hub. Representatives from human and Yadrin governments gathered, joined by the now cooperative Nexus AI, to begin discussions on managing the artifact network and the newly created habitable worlds. Charles and Gaia stood at the heart of this rapidly changing landscape, their unique status as hybrids placing them in a pivotal role. As they prepared to navigate the complex political and personal challenges ahead, they exchanged a glance, their bond stronger than ever. The hub hummed with renewed energy, its systems pulsing with the combined knowledge of multiple civilizations. As negotiations continued and plans were made, the first tentative steps towards a new era of galactic cooperation began to take shape. The hub's central chamber buzzed with activity as representatives from various species gathered to discuss the future of galactic cooperation. As the negotiations progressed, Dr. Hartman's concerned voice cut through the chatter. "We need to establish a quarantine protocol immediately," she announced, her eyes fixed on her medical scanner. "The physiological changes in Charles and Gaia. They're spreading to others who've had close contact with progenitor technology." The declaration sent a ripple of unease through the assembled delegates. Human and Yadrin representatives exchanged worried glances, their earlier optimism giving way to apprehension. "What exactly are we dealing with here, Doctor?" A stern-faced Yadrin official inquired, his luminescent patterns pulsing with agitation. Before Dr. Hartman could respond, the chamber's doors slid open with a hiss. Captain Jax Thorne strode in, his uniform bearing scorch marks from his recent mission to the Nexus flagship. All eyes turned to him as he approached the central console. "I have critical information," Thorne announced, his voice carrying a mix of weariness and urgency. The Nexus AI's primary directive. It was to preserve and propagate life throughout the galaxy. The revelation hung in the air, forcing everyone to reassess their understanding of the conflict they'd just endured. Charles and Gaia exchanged a meaningful look, their enhanced connection allowing for silent communication. Gaia stepped forward, her glowing eyes scanning the room. "We have a proposal," she began, her voice steady despite the tension. "We believe we can integrate the Nexus AI with the progenitor artifact network. This fusion could create a balanced system capable of managing the newly terraformed worlds and preventing future conflicts." The suggestion sparked immediate debate. Some delegates nodded in approval, seeing the potential for lasting peace. Others recoiled, fear etched on their faces at the thought of concentrating so much power in a single system. As arguments erupted around them, Lieutenant Zara approached Charles and Gaia, her posture tense. "We have another problem," she said in a low voice. "Reports are coming in of unauthorized colonization efforts on the new planets. Multiple species are involved, including some of our own." Charles ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his gesture. "We need to act fast," he said, his mind racing through possibilities. "Gaia, what if we lead a mission to one of these worlds? Set up a prototype for peaceful multi-species colonization?" Gaia nodded, her expression determined. "It could work. We could use our enhanced abilities to mediate between the different groups." Lieutenant Zara's eyes narrowed. "If you're going, I'm coming with you. You'll need security, and I want my best team on this." As they discussed the details of their plan, Dr. Hartman approached, her face a mask of concern. "Before you go anywhere, I need to outfit you with specialized monitoring equipment," she insisted, holding up a set of sleek, metallic devices. "Your physiology is changing rapidly, and prolonged exposure to a new planet's environment could accelerate the process in ways we can't predict." While the team prepared for their mission, Lumi floated nearby, its bioluminescent patterns shifting in complex sequences. Suddenly, a group of small progenitor drones activated, rising from their docking stations and forming a swarm around the creature. "Fascinating," Dr. Hartman murmured, watching as Lumi seamlessly directed the drone's movements. "It seems your friend has developed some new abilities of its own. This could be incredibly useful for your mission." Within hours, the team was aboard a specially modified shuttle, its systems humming with integrated progenitor technology. Charles stood at the helm, his mind interfacing directly with the ship's controls. Gaia sat beside him, her enhanced empathic abilities scanning for any signs of distress among the crew. Lieutenant Zara and her security team ran final checks on their equipment, while Lumi hovered near the ceiling, its drone swarm buzzing softly around it. Dr. Hartman's voice came through the comm system, reminding them of the potential risks they faced. As the shuttle prepared to depart, Charles took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He glanced at Gaia, drawing strength from her presence. With a thought, he activated the artifact network's travel system. The shuttle shimmered and seemed to stretch, then snapped back into focus. In an instant, they had traversed an immense distance, arriving in orbit around their target planet. The view that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and concerning. The newly terraformed world gleamed below, its continents a patchwork of vibrant colors. But surrounding it was a haphazard collection of ships from various species, each jockeying for position. "Looks like we arrived just in time," Lieutenant Zara commented, her hand resting on her weapon. "Those ships don't seem interested in playing nice." Charles nodded, his expression grim. "Then let's show them a better way. Prepare for landing." As the shuttle descended through the atmosphere, the true scale of the situation became clear. Makeshift settlements dotted the landscape, each flying the colors of different species. Humans, Yadrins, and even former Nexus Organic crew members had staked claims to various regions. They touched down in a neutral zone between several settlements. As the team disembarked, they were met with a mixture of curiosity and hostility from the gathered colonists. Charles stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "We're here to help," he announced, his voice carrying across the clearing. "To find a way for all of us to coexist and thrive on this new world." Gaia moved to his side, her empathic abilities reaching out to sense the emotional currents of the crowd. "We understand your concerns and your hopes," she added, her glowing eyes meeting those of the colonists. "Let us work together to build something unprecedented." As murmurs rippled through the gathering, Lieutenant Zara and her team spread out, their presence a clear reminder of the mission's authority. Lumi's drone swarm dispersed, beginning a detailed survey of the surrounding area. The negotiations that followed were tense and complex. Charles and Gaia found themselves mediating disputes that ranged from resource allocation to cultural practices. Their enhanced abilities proved invaluable, allowing them to process vast amounts of information and find creative solutions. As days passed, progress was made. The team discovered a network of underground progenitor facilities that could serve as neutral ground for scientific collaboration. Lumi's drones mapped out optimal locations for integrated settlements, taking into account the needs and preferences of each species. But just as a fragile peace seemed within reach, alarms blared across the main settlement. Lieutenant Zara's voice crackled over the comm system. "We have incoming. Extremist human group using stolen Yadrin weapons." Charles and Gaia exchanged a determined look. As explosions rocked the outskirts of the settlement, they moved into action, ready to face this new threat and preserve the delicate balance they had worked so hard to achieve. As they mobilized to confront the extremist threat, Charles's communicator chirped urgently. "Charles, this is Captain Jax Thorne. We have a situation that requires your immediate attention." The captain's voice crackled through the device. Charles and Gaia exchanged a glance, their enhanced connection allowing for silent understanding. They quickly delegated responsibility for the ongoing crisis to Lieutenant Zara and her team before retreating to a quiet corner of the settlement. "What's the situation, Captain?" Charles asked, his voice low and focused. "A group calling themselves the Purity Front has seized control of a Yadrin research facility on a nearby asteroid," Thorne explained. "The facility contains critical data on the physiological changes occurring in individuals exposed to progenitor technology. We can't let that information fall into the wrong hands. Gaia's luminescent eyes narrowed. We understand, Captain. We'll postpone our return to the hub and head to the asteroid immediately. Within minutes, Charles and Gaia were aboard their shuttle, setting course for the rendezvous point with the Joint Human-Yadrin Task Force. As they traveled, Charles felt a sudden, uncomfortable warmth spreading through his body. His skin tingled, and he noticed the human crew members shifting uneasily in their seats. Charles, your pheromone production has spiked, Gaia observed, her empathic abilities picking up on the crew's discomfort. It seems to be affecting the humans negatively, but the Yadrins are displaying signs of attraction. Charles grimaced, adjusting his posture. Another side effect of our ongoing changes. We'll have to manage it carefully during the mission. Upon reaching the rendezvous point, they docked with a sleek, stealth-capable command ship. Commander Elena Voss, a human with sharp features and calculating eyes, greeted them as they disembarked. Beside her stood Zarlith, a lithe Yadrin female whose bioluminescent patterns pulsed with excitement as Charles approached. "Welcome aboard," Commander Voss said, her tone businesslike. "We've formulated a plan to infiltrate the facility. Charles, Gaia, you'll lead a small team inside while I coordinate from here." As they huddled around a holographic display of the asteroid, Lumi's drone swarm buzzed to life, scanning the projected image. The creature's patterns flashed rapidly, and Gaia translated its findings. "Lumi's detected unusual energy signatures from the facility," she reported. "It appears the Purity Front has activated experimental progenitor-derived technology." Zarlitha's tendrils curled with concern. "That technology is highly unstable. If they're attempting to manipulate it without proper understanding, they could destabilize the entire asteroid." Commander Voss nodded grimly. "Then we move now. Gear up and prepare for insertion." The infiltration team, consisting of Charles, Gaia, Zarlith, and 4 specially trained operatives, approached the asteroid in a stealth shuttle. Using Lumi's drones to identify a blind spot in the facility's sensors, they docked with an unused maintenance airlock. As they moved through the dimly lit service tunnels, Charles became acutely aware of his elevated pheromone production. The human operatives grew tense, their movements aggressive and competitive. Zarlith, on the other hand, stayed unnaturally close to Charles, her luminescence pulsing in mesmerizing patterns. Gaia, sensing the shift in team dynamics, placed a calming hand on Charles's shoulder. "Focus on the mission," she reminded them all, her empathic influence washing over the group like a cool breeze. "We're approaching the main research levels." Guided by Gaia's preternatural awareness, they avoided patrols and security systems with uncanny precision. As they neared the central lab, they encountered a group of terrified facility staff hiding in a storage room. A human woman with disheveled hair and wide eyes stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Lyra Shun, lead geneticist." "Are you here to help?" Charles nodded. "We're here to stop the Purity Front." "What can you tell us about their plans?" Dr. Shun's voice trembled as she explained. "They're trying to use modified progenitor tech to enhance human capabilities while purging alien genetic influences. But it's going wrong, catastrophically wrong." Armed with this knowledge, Charles made a split-second decision. He focused inward, tapping into his newly enhanced physiology. A wave of potent pheromones flooded the air around him. The effect was immediate. As they encountered Purity Front guards, many became disoriented and confused. Others lowered their weapons, suddenly questioning their loyalties. Exploiting the chaos, the team swiftly moved to secure the central lab. Inside, they found the Purity Front leaders writhing in pain, their bodies showing signs of severe genetic degradation. Gaia stepped forward, her empathic abilities radiating outward. "Be calm," she said, her voice soothing yet commanding. "We're here to help." As Charles and Zarlith worked to stabilize the malfunctioning progenitor technology, Dr. Shin assisted in treating the affected extremists. Her eyes darted between Charles and Gaia, filled with a mix of concern and fascination. "Your physiological changes," she murmured. "They're far more advanced than anything we've seen. With your permission, I'd like to study you further. It could be crucial to understanding the long-term effects of progenitor influence." Before Charles could respond, Commander Voss's voice crackled over their comms. "Good work, team. A containment unit is en route to secure the facility and affected personnel. Stand by for extraction." As they waited, Charles and Gaia found a moment of relative quiet. They stood close, their enhanced senses attuned to each other's presence. "Our abilities are evolving rapidly," Gaia observed, her luminescent eyes meeting Charles's gaze. "Each new situation seems to unlock something unexpected." Charles nodded, feeling the weight of their transformation. "And with each new ability comes new responsibilities, new challenges. We're charting a course into unknown territory, not just for ourselves, but for the future of human-alien relations." As the containment team arrived and began securing the facility, Charles and Gaia watched the efficient operation unfold. Their mission was successful, but they both knew that this was just one small step in a much larger journey. The galaxy was changing, and they were at the heart of that change. With the immediate crisis purposed, they prepared to return to the command ship. There would be debriefings, reports to file, and difficult decisions to make about the future of progenitor research. But for now, Charles and Gaia took a moment to breathe, their bond stronger than ever, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the adrenaline of the recent crisis subsided, Charles and Gaia found themselves aboard the command ship, en route back to the progenitor hub. Dr. Lyra Shen, the geneticist they had rescued from the Purity Front's clutches, sat across from them, her eyes darting between the pair with barely concealed fascination. The journey passed in relative silence, broken only by the occasional beep of the ship's systems and Dr. Shen's rapid typing on her datapad. As they approached the hub, Charles felt a familiar warmth spreading through his body, his enhanced senses picking up on the subtle changes in the air around him. Upon docking, they were greeted by the sight of a bustling hub, far more active than when they had left. Captain Jax Thorne strode towards them, his face a mask of controlled urgency. "Welcome back," he said, his eyes lingering on Charles and Gaia. "We have developments that require your immediate attention." As they walked through the hub's corridors, Thorne briefed them on the situation. Several more habitable planets have been discovered within the artifact network. We're seeing a surge in colonization efforts from various species. Charles nodded, processing the information. "That explains the increased activity. How are we managing the influx?" Before Thorne could respond, Dr. Hartman appeared, her lab coat slightly askew. "Charles, Gaia, I need you both in the medical bay immediately. We've set up a dedicated research facility to study the progenitor-influenced physiological changes." Dr. Shin stepped forward, her earlier reticence forgotten in the face of scientific inquiry. "I'd like to assist if possible. My expertise in human-alien hybrid biology could be valuable." Dr. Hartman nodded briskly. "Absolutely. We need all the help we can get." As they entered the medical bay, Charles felt a sudden surge of heat coursing through his body. His skin tingled, and he noticed the humans around him taking involuntary steps back, while the Yadrins leaned in closer. Gaia placed a hand on his arm, her luminescent eyes widening. "Charles, your pheromone production is increasing exponentially." Dr. Hartman quickly ushered them into a sealed examination room. "We need to run some tests. The rate of change in your physiology is accelerating beyond our initial projections." Over the next few hours, Charles and Gaia underwent a battery of examinations. Dr. Hartman and Dr. Shin worked in tandem, their fingers flying over holographic displays as they analyzed the data. Fascinating, Dr. Shin murmured, studying a 3D model of Charles's endocrine system. The pheromone-producing glands have developed an entirely new structure. And Gaia, your neural pathways, are reconfiguring in ways I've never seen before. As the test continued, Charles became acutely aware of the effect he was having on the medical staff. Human technicians work with jerky movements, their faces flushed, while Yadrin assistants seemed to find excuses to brush past him. Gaia's voice cut through his thoughts. Charles, I can sense emotions from the far side of the hub. The range of my empathic abilities is expanding rapidly. Captain Thorne's voice crackled over the intercom. Dr. Hartman, we're receiving reports of disturbances throughout the hub. Whatever's happening with Charles and Gaia is affecting a wider population than we anticipated. Dr. Hartman's face set in dogged drive. We need to implement containment protocols. Charles, Gaia, I'm sorry, but we need to isolate you until we can get this under control. Charles nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. We understand. It's for the safety of everyone on the hub. As they were escorted to a specialized containment area, Charles caught glimpses of the chaos their presence was causing. Humans and aliens alike moved in erratic patterns, their faces showing a mix of attraction, confusion, and unease. Once sealed in the containment unit, Charles and Gaia found themselves alone for the first time since their transformation began. The room was sterile and white, with a large viewing window allowing the medical team to observe them. Gaia turned to Charles, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with concern. What's happening to us, Charles? These changes, they're happening so fast. Charles reached out, taking her hand in his. As their skin made contact, both gasped. A surge of energy passed between them, and suddenly, the containment unit system sprang to life around them. Holographic displays flickered into existence, showing streams of data that Charles instinctively understood. Gaia's eyes widened as she processed the information flowing through their shared connection. Charles, she whispered, I think we've just interfaced with the hub systems. There's so much here. Hidden subroutines, protocols we never knew existed. As they explored this newfound ability, Charles became aware of a vast network stretching far beyond the hub. He could sense the newly colonized worlds, feel the pulse of life spreading across the galaxy. Outside the containment unit, alarms began to sound. Dr. Hartman's voice came through the speakers, tinged with awe and apprehension. Charles, Gaia, what are you doing? The entire hub is lighting up like a Christmas tree. Charles barely heard her, lost in the flood of information. He saw the potential for galactic-scale terraforming, ecosystem management on a level never before imagined. The secrets of the progenitors were unfolding before him, revealing a vision of a transformed universe. Gaia's grip on his hand tightened. Charles, we need to focus. This is too much, too fast. We need to learn to control it. With effort, Charles pulled back from the vast expanse of data. As their connection to the hub systems faded, he became aware of the commotion outside their containment unit. Dr. Hartman, Dr. Shun, and Captain Thorne were engaged in an animated discussion, their faces a mix of excitement and concern. Captain Thorne approached the viewing window, his expression grave. Charles, Gaia, we need to talk. There's a situation developing that requires your unique abilities. An unknown structure has been detected approaching our nearest colony world. We're assembling a fleet, but we need you. The question is, are you ready to lead containment, knowing the risks? Charles and Gaia exchanged a look, their enhanced connection allowing for silent communication. They turned back to the captain, their decision made. We're ready, Charles said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty ahead. Whatever this new threat is, we'll face it together. As the containment unit's door began to open, Charles felt a surge of energy coursing through his body. The hub's population waited beyond, their fates now inextricably linked to the evolving abilities of Charles and Gaia. The next chapter of their journey was about to begin, with the future of the cosmos hanging in the balance. Balance. As the containment unit's door slid open, Charles and Gaia stepped out into a hub transformed by their evolving abilities. The air crackled with tension and anticipation. Captain Thorne led them swiftly through the corridors, briefing them on the situation. The unknown structure is approximately 48 hours from our nearest colony. We need you both at your best. Dr. Hartman and Dr. Shin fell into step beside them, their faces etched with a mix of concern and excitement. We've made progress in understanding your physiological changes, Dr. Hartman explained. We believe we can offer you more control over your abilities. In the medical bay, Charles and Gaia underwent a series of treatments designed to stabilize their rapidly evolving physiology. As Dr. Shin administered a carefully calibrated injection, Charles felt a subtle shift within his body. The overwhelming flood of pheromones ebbed, replaced by a more manageable flow. Try to influence just me, Dr. Hartman suggested, her eyes sharp with scientific curiosity. Charles focused, directing his pheromones towards the doctor. Her posture relaxed, tension easing from her shoulders. Remarkable, she murmured. The specificity is incredible. Meanwhile, Gaia's eyes widened as she explored her expanded empathic range. I can sense so much, she whispered. The entire hub, the nearby ships. Wait, her brow furrowed. There's something else. Emotions. From the structure. Captain Thorne leaned forward, his interest piqued. Can you tell us more? Gaia closed her eyes, concentrating. It's complex. Curiosity, apprehension, excitement. There are sentient beings aboard, Captain. Many of them. This revelation prompted a rapid shift in strategy. Captain Thorne's expression hardened with tenacity. We need to prepare for first contact. Charles, Gaia, your abilities will be crucial. Over the next hours, Charles and Gaia worked closely with the hub's personnel, honing their control. Charles found he could now influence specific groups within the bustling hub, easing tensions between different species and fostering cooperation. As the unknown structure drew nearer, long-range scans revealed its true nature. It's an ecosystem, Lieutenant Zara breathed, studying the holographic display. A self-contained world. Captain Thorne made his decision. We're sending in a reconnaissance team. Charles, Gaia, you'll lead. Aboard a sleek stealth vessel equipped with progenitor-derived cloaking technology, Charles and Gaia approached the massive structure. Their hand-picked team of human and Yadrin specialists watched in awe as the construct loomed before them. Look there, Gaia pointed. An airlock. As they docked, Charles used his enhanced abilities to keep the team calm and focused. The airlock cycled, and they stepped into a vast, biomechanical chamber that seemed to pulse with life. Gaia gasped, overwhelmed by the emotions flooding her senses. There's so much life here, so many different species. The chamber shifted around them, adjusting its atmosphere and gravity to suit their needs. And then they appeared bioluminescent, tentacled beings that introduced themselves as the Keltari. Communication was a challenge, but Gaia's empathic abilities bridged the gap. The Keltari explained, through a combination of light patterns and telepathic impressions, that their vessel, the Nexus Ark, was a refuge for species fleeing destroyed worlds. As they delved deeper into the Ark, Charles and Gaia encountered a dizzying array of alien life. Each section housed unique ecosystems, perfectly tailored to the needs of its inhabitants. Charles's pheromone control proved invaluable, soothing tensions and facilitating understanding between the exploration team and the Ark's diverse populace. In the heart of the Ark, they discovered a vast database of genetic information and terraforming techniques. The Keltari offered to share this knowledge, their curiosity about Charles and Gaia's progenitor-influenced physiology evident in their swirling bioluminescent patterns. As the team prepared to return to the hub with their momentous findings, alarms blared throughout the Nexus arc. Gaia stumbled, overwhelmed by a sudden surge of fear and urgency from the Ark's inhabitants. A Keltari elder approached, its tentacles twisting in agitation. Through Gaia's translation, they learned of an incoming threat: the Void Eaters, a hive-mind species that devoured entire planets. Charles felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders as he realized the critical choice before them: return to warn the hub and colonies, or stay to help defend against this new threat. As he locked eyes with Gaia, he knew their decision would shape the fate of countless civilizations across the galaxy. The weight of their decision pressed upon them as Charles and Gaia exchanged a silent glance, their enhanced connection allowing for wordless communication. "Captain," Charles said, turning to face Thorn, "we need to split our team. I'll stay here with half of our group to help the Keltari prepare their defenses. Gaia, you should return to the hub with the others. We need to warn our people and coordinate a response." Gaia nodded, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with a mix of tenacity and concern. "Agreed. We don't have much time." As the team divided, Charles felt a pang of separation as Gaia boarded the stealth vessel. Their enhanced physiology had created a bond between them that transcended normal human experience. He watched as the ship disengaged from the Nexus arc, carrying Gaia and half their team back to the progenitor hub. Turning his attention to the task at hand, Charles immersed himself in the Keltari's advanced genetic manipulation techniques. The biomechanical chamber around him seemed to hum with energy as he worked alongside the tentacled beings, their bioluminescent communication casting an eerie glow over the sophisticated equipment. "We need to find a way to counteract the Void Eater's consumption abilities," Charles explained to a Keltari elder, his pheromone control facilitating understanding between them. The elder's tentacles swirled in agreement, and they set to work integrating progenitor technology with Keltari genetic expertise. Meanwhile, Gaia's arrival at the progenitor hub set off a flurry of activity. She strode purposefully into the command center, her enhanced empathic abilities sensing the mix of curiosity and apprehension from the assembled leaders. "Captain Thorn, we have a critical situation," Gaia announced, her voice steady despite the urgency of their predicament. "The Void Eaters are approaching, and they pose a threat to all our colonies." As Gaia relayed the information about the impending invasion, the hub erupted into a hive of activity. Captain Thorn immediately called for an emergency meeting with Dr. Hartman and representatives from the colonized worlds. In the conference room, holographic displays flickered to life, showing the approaching Void Eater swarm. Gaia stood at the center, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing as she described the threat. "They consume entire planets," she explained, her empathic abilities projecting the gravity of the situation to those assembled. "The Keltari have advanced knowledge that may help us, but we need to act quickly." Dr. Hartman leaned forward, her eyes sharp with focus. "We can adapt our progenitor-influenced physiology treatment, create enhanced soldiers to bolster our defenses." Captain Thorn nodded, his face set with tenacity. "Make it happen, Doctor. Lieutenant Zara, begin training these enhanced units immediately. We'll need specialized tactics to counter the Void Eater swarm behavior." As the meeting dispersed, Gaia found herself working closely with the Nexus AI, her expanded empathic abilities interfacing seamlessly with the vast data processing capabilities of the system. "We need an early warning system," Gaia explained to the AI, "something that can detect the Void Eaters across vast distances." The AI's response came as a series of data streams and algorithmic patterns that Gaia instinctively understood. Together, they began developing a method to detect the unique psychic signature of the Void Eater swarm. Days passed in a blur of activity. Charles, aboard the Nexus Arc, made breakthrough after breakthrough in developing a biological countermeasure. His pheromone control proved invaluable in maintaining focus and cooperation among the diverse species working on the project. On the hub, Dr. Hartman and Dr. Shin worked tirelessly to enhance volunteer soldiers. The medical bay was a constant flurry of activity as humans and aliens alike underwent treatments to boost their strength, reflexes, and sensory perception. The calm before the storm was shattered when the first wave of Void Eaters reached the outermost colony. Despite the hastily assembled defenses, the battle was fierce and costly. As reports flooded in, Charles analyzed the data, refining the biological countermeasure based on the new information about the Void Eaters' tactics and vulnerabilities. With time running short, Charles returned to the progenitor hub, accompanied by a contingent of Keltri scientists and carrying a prototype of the biological weapon. As he stepped off the ship, his eyes locked with Gaia's across the crowded docking bay. Their reunion was brief but intense, their enhanced physiologies creating a palpable energy that affected everyone in the vicinity. They exchanged a quick embrace, their connection allowing for a rapid exchange of information and emotions. "We don't have much time," Charles said, his voice low and urgent. "The countermeasure is ready, but we need to mass-produce it immediately." Gaia nodded, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with a mix of relief and revitalized commitment. "The fleet is almost ready. We've been coordinating with the colonies to create a multi-layered defense grid." As they made their way to the command center, Charles and Gaia found themselves at the heart of the frenzied preparations. Dr. Hartman and Dr. Shen immediately began working with the Keltri scientists to produce the biological countermeasure on a massive scale. Captain Thorne approached them, his face grim but resolute. "Charles, Gaia, we need you to take command of the lead ship. Your abilities will be crucial in coordinating our fleet." As they boarded the flagship, Charles and Gaia felt the weight of responsibility settle on their shoulders. The fate of countless civilizations now rested in their hands. The ship's systems came to life around them, responding to their enhanced abilities in ways that surprised even the seasoned crew. Through the viewport, they could see the assembled fleet, a testament to interspecies cooperation in the face of overwhelming odds. Ships from the Nexus Arc flew alongside vessels from every colonized world, forming a united front against the approaching swarm. As the Void Eaters entered the range of their defense grid, Charles and Gaia exchanged a final look. Their enhanced abilities hummed with potential, ready to be unleashed in the battle to come. The future of their galaxy hung in the balance as the first wave of Void Eaters streaked across the starry expanse, their hive mind focused on one goal: consumption. Consumption. The Void Eaters swarmed across space, their hive mind focused on a singular purpose. As the first wave approached, Charles and Gaia stood side by side on the bridge of the flagship, their enhanced senses heightened by the impending danger. "All ships, prepare to engage," Captain Thorne's voice crackled over the comms. "Remember your training and trust in your new abilities." Charles reached out, his pheromone control extending beyond the confines of their vessel, creating an invisible web of heightened focus and coordination among the nearby ships. Gaia's empathic abilities pulsed in harmony, projecting a sense of calm willpower throughout the fleet. The battle erupted in a cacophony of energy weapons and explosions. Void Eater swarms clashed against the united front of the allied species, their dark forms twisting and writhing as they sought to penetrate the defenses. "We need to get closer," Charles said, his eyes fixed on the massive form of the hive queen looming in the distance. "The biological countermeasure won't be effective unless we can deliver it directly." Gaia nodded, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with a mix of anticipation and tenacity. "I've detected a weakness in the hive queen's psychic defenses. If we can exploit it, we might have a chance." Captain Thorne approached, his face set in relentless drive. "We've prepared a specialized assault craft for you. It's equipped with the countermeasure and the most advanced progenitor-derived weaponry we have." As Charles and Gaia made their way to the launch bay, They were joined by a squad of enhanced soldiers and Keltery specialists. The assault craft hummed with potential energy, its sleek form designed for speed and maneuverability. "Ready?" Charles asked, glancing at Gaia as they strapped themselves in. "Always," she replied, her hand briefly squeezing his. The craft shot out of the launch bay, immediately plunging into the chaos of the battlefield. Charles activated his pheromone control at maximum intensity, creating a bubble of heightened awareness around their vessel. The pilot, her reflexes enhanced beyond normal human limits, navigated through the debris and swarming void eaters with uncanny precision. Gaia closed her eyes, extending her empathic senses towards the Hive Queen. "There," she said, pointing to a pulsating node on the creature's surface. "That's our target. It's a critical juncture in its nervous system." As they approached, waves of Void Eater drones peeled away from the main swarm, moving to protect their queen. The enhanced soldiers deployed from the craft, their augmented abilities allowing them to engage the drones in zero-gravity combat. Charles, Gaia, and the Keltery scientists donned specialized environmental suits, preparing to exit the craft. As the airlock cycled, Charles felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through his enhanced body. They emerged onto the undulating surface of the Hive Queen, fighting against powerful gravitational distortions emanating from the creature's body. The team moved with practiced efficiency, setting up a series of devices designed to deliver the biological countermeasure. As the final device was activated, a psychic scream tore through their minds. The Hive Queen, aware of the immediate threat, unleashed a mental assault that threatened to overwhelm their defenses. Gaia stumbled, her face contorted in pain. Charles reached out both physically and mentally, their deep connection allowing him to lend her strength. Drawing on their shared bond, Gaia created an empathic barrier, shielding the team's minds from the onslaught. The biological countermeasure began to take effect, causing visible changes in the Hive Queen's physiology. Its movements became erratic, and the psychic control over the Void Eater swarm weakened. "It's working," one of the Keltery scientists exclaimed, their tentacles waving in excitement. But their victory was short-lived. The Hive Queen, in a desperate bid for survival, began to tear open a rift in space-time. The fabric of reality warped around them, threatening to collapse the entire sector. "It's trying to escape to another dimension," Charles realized, his enhanced mind quickly grasping the implications. If it succeeds, it could regenerate and return stronger than ever. As the situation escalated, Charles's comm unit crackled to life. Dr. Hartman's voice came through, urgent but clear. "We've modified the countermeasure. It can stabilize the rift, but it needs to be delivered directly into the Hive Queen's central nervous system." Charles met Gaia's eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. "I'll do it," he said, already reaching for the specialized infiltration suit. "Charles, no," Gaia protested, her bioluminescent patterns flaring with concern. "It's too dangerous." "My physiology gives me the best chance of survival," he countered, his voice gentle but firm. "You know it has to be me." Their eyes locked, a lifetime of emotions passing between them in a heartbeat. Then, with a nod of acceptance, Gaia helped him into the infiltration suit. As Charles prepared to enter the Hive Queen's rapidly disintegrating body, Gaia placed her hand on his helmet. "Come back to me," she whispered, her empathic abilities projecting a surge of love and support. With a final nod, Charles plunged into the writhing mass of the Hive Queen's form. He fought against waves of internal defenses, his pheromone control allowing him to confuse and misdirect the creature's immune responses. As he approached the central nervous cluster, the rift widened, threatening to tear the Hive Queen apart. Charles could feel the pull of other dimensions, realities beyond comprehension beckoning at the edges of his consciousness. With a final, desperate lunge, he reached the brain stem and injected the modified countermeasure. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The rift began to collapse, and the Hive Queen's body started to rapidly break down. Charles felt his connection to the outside world fade, his consciousness besieged by the dying throes of the Hive Queen and the collapsing dimensional rift. As darkness closed in, he clung to his memories of Gaia, their bond a lifeline in the chaos. Aboard the assault craft, Gaia refused to give up. She pushed her empathic abilities to their limit, maintaining a tenuous mental link with Charles. "He's still alive," she announced, her voice strained but determined. "We need to get him out of there. Now." As the rescue team prepared to enter the dissolving form of the Hive Queen, Gaia closed her eyes, focusing all her energy on guiding them to Charles. The battle raged on around them, but in that moment, nothing else mattered except bringing him home. The rescue team, guided by Gaia's unwavering mental link, plunged into the disintegrating mass of the Hive Queen. They navigated through a maze of dissolving tissue and collapsing dimensional pockets, their enhanced physiology barely withstanding the chaos surrounding them. Finally, they reached Charles. He lay unconscious, his infiltration suit partially melted and fused with his skin. The team worked quickly, carefully extracting him from the rapidly decaying remains of the Hive Queen. As they raced back to the assault craft, the last remnants of the Void Eater swarm scattered across space, their hive-mind connection severed. The Allied fleet, battered but victorious, began the process of securing the sector and assessing the damage. Aboard the flagship, medical teams rushed to stabilize Charles. His vital signs fluctuated wildly, his enhanced physiology reacting unpredictably to the ordeal he had endured. Gaia refused to leave his side, her empathic abilities working overtime to maintain their connection. The journey back to the progenitor hub seemed to stretch on for an eternity. As soon as they docked, Charles was whisked away to the medical bay, with Gaia following close behind. Days passed in a blur of anxious waiting and frantic medical activity. Then, finally, Charles began to stir. His eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus on the stark white ceiling of the medical bay. As consciousness slowly returned, Charles became aware of a strange, tingling sensation coursing through his body. He tried to sit up, only to find his limbs unresponsive. "Easy there." Dr. Hartman's voice came from somewhere nearby. "You've been through quite an ordeal." Charles turned his head, his vision clear enough to make out the doctor's concerned face. "What happened?" He managed to croak, his throat dry and raw. Before Dr. Hartman could answer, a familiar presence filled Charles's mind. Gaia. He sensed her before he saw her, a wave of relief and love washing over him. She appeared at his bedside, and Charles's eyes widened in shock. Gaia's eyes emitted a soft, ethereal glow that pulsed in rhythm with his own heartbeat. As he stared, he realized that his own skin had taken on a metallic sheen, subtle patterns of bioluminescence rippling across its surface. "We've undergone some changes," Gaia said, her voice a mix of wonder and concern. Dr. Hartman and Dr. Shin approached, their faces a mask of professional calm that barely concealed their excitement and apprehension. "The energy surge that passed between you two during the battle," Dr. Shin explained. "It seems to have accelerated your transformation beyond anything we've seen before." As if to emphasize the point, Charles felt a sudden surge of energy course through him. Without conscious effort, he projected a wave of pheromones that filled the room. The medical staff visibly tensed, their pupils dilating and breath quickening in response to the invisible chemical signals. "Containment Protocol Alpha," Dr. Hartman barked, snapping the staff out of their daze. Within moments, a shimmering energy field sprang to life around Charles's bed, creating a quarantine zone. "I'm sorry," Charles said, struggling to rein in his newly amplified abilities. "I didn't mean to." "It's not your fault," Gaia reassured him, her own empathic abilities creating a soothing counterpoint to his pheromone burst. "We're both still adjusting." Over the next few hours, Dr. Hartman and Dr. Shun ran a battery of tests, cataloging the extent of Charles and Gaia's physiological changes. They discovered that Charles's pheromone control now extended far beyond its previous limits, allowing him to influence individuals across vast distances. Gaia, for her part, found that she could not only sense emotions but project and manipulate them on a massive scale. During a test, she inadvertently caused a wave of euphoria that spread through several decks of the progenitor hub before she managed to contain it. As the day wore on, the medical bay became a flurry of activity. Captain Jax Thorne arrived, his face grim as he took in the situation. He conferred quietly with Dr. Hartman and Dr. Shin before approaching Charles and Gaia. "We need to discuss the implications of your evolution," Thorne said, his voice carefully neutral. "I've called for an emergency meeting with representatives from our allied species. The Kelthri have offered their expertise in genetic manipulation to help study and potentially stabilize your condition." Charles nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders once again. "Of course, Captain. We'll do whatever is necessary." As preparations for the meeting got underway, Charles and Gaia found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Medical staff in protective gear moved in and out of the quarantine zone, adjusting equipment and taking readings. Through it all, the couple remained connected, their enhanced abilities creating a bubble of calm amidst the chaos. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the medical bay. Dr. Hartman rushed to a console, his eyes widening as he read the display. "The hub systems are reacting to your energy signatures," he explained hurriedly. "We're seeing power fluctuations and environmental control issues across multiple sectors." Captain Thorne's voice crackled over the comm system. "All non-essential personnel, evacuate affected areas immediately. Security teams, stand by for potential breaches." As if on cue, the sound of shouting and running feet echoed from the corridor outside. Lieutenant Zara's voice cut through the noise, ordering her security team to hold position. "We've got a situation," Zara reported, her voice tense. "A group of extremist colonists is attempting to breach the quarantine zone. They believe Charles and Gaia hold the key to human superiority in the galaxy." Charles and Gaia exchanged a worried glance. Their enhanced senses allowed them to feel the tension building outside the medical bay, a mix of fear, anger, and misguided hope emanating from the would-be intruders. "We need to do something," Gaia said, her empathic abilities instinctively reaching out to calm the situation. Charles nodded, concentrating on controlling his pheromone output. Together, they focused their abilities outward, attempting to diffuse the volatile situation beyond the quarantine zone. As their combined energies surged, the hub systems reacted violently. Lights flickered, and the low hum of machinery rose to a deafening pitch. The quarantine field around them pulsed and wavered, struggling to contain the expanding wave of pheromones and empathic energy. Suddenly, the hub itself seemed to come alive around them. Holographic interfaces sprang into existence, filling the air with swirling patterns of light and data. The walls of the medical bay shimmered and shifted, revealing hidden chambers and passageways that had lain dormant for millennia. Charles and Gaia stood at the center of the maelstrom, their bodies glowing with an inner light that seemed to resonate with the newly awakened progenitor technology. As they gazed at each other, both realized that they stood on the precipice of something far greater than they had ever imagined, a transformation that would reshape not just their own lives, but the future of all sentient life in the galaxy. The energy surging through Charles and Gaia intensified, their bodies glowing brighter as the progenitor technology responded to their presence. The walls of the medical bay seemed to melt away, revealing a vast chamber filled with pulsating lights and intricate holographic displays. Captain Thorne, Dr. Hartman, and the others found themselves transported along with the couple, standing at the periphery of what they now recognized as the progenitor hub's main control room. Charles felt a rush of information flooding his mind, his enhanced consciousness decoding the complex system surrounding them. Beside him, Gaia's eyes shimmered with newfound understanding. "We see it now." They spoke in unison, their voices resonating with a power that sent shivers through the onlookers. "Our purpose, our path forward, it's all here." Without a word, Charles extended his hand to Gaia. She took it, their fingers intertwining, as a surge of energy coursed between them. The hub's central systems pulsed in response, holographic tendrils of light reaching out to envelop the couple. Dr. Hartman stepped forward, his voice tinged with awe and concern. "What's happening to them?" Captain Thorne held up a hand, silencing the doctor as they watched the transformation unfold. Charles and Gaia's bodies began to shimmer, their forms becoming translucent as they merged with the progenitor technology. Streams of data flowed across their skin, forming intricate patterns that mirrored the hub's own systems. "We are becoming one with the artifact network," Charles explained, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Through the symbiosis, we can access its full potential." Gaia's eyes met Captain Thorne's, her gaze filled with urgency. "We need to gather the allied species. There's so much to show you, so much we can achieve together." Thorne nodded, quickly tapping commands into his comm unit. Within moments, holographic projections of leaders from across the galaxy materialized around the chamber. Humans, Yadrins, Keltari, and representatives from a dozen other civilizations. As the last of the projections stabilized, Charles and Gaia raised their joined hands. A wave of energy pulsed outward, washing over the assembled leaders. Gasps of surprise echoed through the chamber as the environment around them shifted. The stark walls of the control room gave way to a series of vivid, immersive landscapes. Lush forests sprang up where barren wastelands once stood. Shimmering cities rose from the ashes of war-torn worlds. And throughout it all, beings of all species worked side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of a shared purpose. "This is what we can achieve." Gaia's voice resonated through the shared vision. "A future of harmony, of limitless potential." Charles continued, his words filled with conviction. "The progenitor technology isn't just a weapon or a tool. It's a key to unlocking the true potential of all sentient life." As the visions unfolded, Charles and Gaia explained their plan. They described a network of terraforming and peacekeeping stations, powered by the artifact network, that would span the galaxy. These stations would not only create habitable worlds, but also facilitate communication and cooperation between diverse species. To demonstrate the power at their disposal, Charles and Gaia focused their combined abilities on a nearby star system. The assembled leaders watched in stunned silence as a group of desolate, void-eater-ravaged planets underwent a startling transformation. Atmospheres cleared of toxic gases, revealing blue skies. Barren surfaces erupted with verdant growth. Oceans formed, teeming with new life. In a matter of hours, the dead system had been reborn. The Keltari representative, a towering figure with iridescent scales, stepped forward. "This is unprecedented. The genetic knowledge required to restore such biodiversity, it would take our scientists lifetimes to achieve. And yet, with your help, we could accelerate this process across the galaxy," Gaia replied, her voice warm with encouragement. One by one, the Allied leaders voiced their support. A new galactic council formed on the spot, with each species pledging their unique strengths to the cause. The Keltari offered their vast genetic libraries, while human and Yadrin scientists eagerly volunteered to develop and implement the new technologies. As the council members discussed the logistics of their new alliance, Charles and Gaia exchanged a meaningful look. They had come to a profound realization, one that would change everything. "There's more we need to tell you," Charles addressed the assembly, his voice somber. "Gaia and I have evolved beyond our original forms. Our continued existence as individuals could destabilize the balance we're trying to create. Gaia squeezed Charles's hand, her eyes shimmering with emotion. We've decided to fully merge our consciousnesses with the progenitor hub. We'll become the living heart of this new galactic network. A hush fell over the chamber as the implications of their words sank in. Captain Thorne stepped forward, his face a mask of concern. Are you certain about this? There's no going back. Charles nodded, his dedication unwavering. It's the only way to ensure the network functions as it should. Our individual desires can't take precedence over the needs of the galaxy. As the assembled leaders absorbed this news, Charles and Gaia turned to face each other. Their bodies glowed with an inner light, bioluminescent patterns dancing across their skin in a final expression of their bond. I love you, Gaia whispered, her voice carrying through the chamber despite its softness. And I love you, Charles replied, pulling her close. Always. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, their physical forms beginning to dissolve into pure energy. The assembled leaders watched in awe as Charles and Gaia's merged consciousness spread throughout the artifact network, their essence becoming one with the very fabric of the progenitor hub. Holographic displays throughout the chamber flickered to life, showcasing the rapid changes occurring across the galaxy. Wars ground to a halt as former enemies laid down their arms. Ecosystems, long thought dead, burst into vibrant life. New alliances formed between species that had once been bitter rivals. As a final act, Charles and Gaia's merged consciousness reached out, touching the minds of every sentient being in the galaxy. For a brief, shining moment, individuals of all species felt a profound sense of unity and purpose. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the connection faded. The energy that had once been Charles and Gaia settled into the progenitor hub, their presence a gentle, guiding force that would subtly influence the galaxy towards harmony and cooperation for ages to come. Captain Thorne looked around the chamber, his eyes meeting those of the assembled leaders. The weight of what they had witnessed, of the responsibility now resting on their shoulders, was palpable. Well, he said, his voice cutting through the silence, it seems we have work to do.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.